Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Gilliland. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, using your tabulator. Thank you, Council. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Start off, Mayor reads out an introduction statement. So, welcome to Aurora's public planning meeting. The purpose of this public meeting is to inform the public and obtain public input regarding the options associated with amendments to the zoning bylaw and the process of reviewing and approving new development and large additions within the stable neighborhood study area. For the options associated with amendments to the zoning bylaw that will be considered by Council tonight, the following process will occur. 1. Town planning staff will outline the options being considered. 2. Following staff's presentation, members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns respecting the stable neighborhood study. And 3. Town staff will answer your questions, and I will keep track of the questions, and when I have several, I will direct them to whoever can best answer them. It is very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses of individuals having an interest in the planning application. Therefore, if you plan to speak to council at this meeting, or if you wish to be notified of any further council or committee meetings concerning the stable neighborhood study being considered, you must complete one of the green interested party forms. Linda is holding them up right there, and give it to our committee secretary sitting at the front. Under the Planning Act, residents have the right to appeal any decision of council on a planning application to the local planning appeal tribunal. But you must verbally express any comments or concerns here tonight, or submit any comments or concerns in writing to the town prior to council adopting an amendment. The tribunal may dismiss all or part of an appeal made in respect of an application. This public meeting is being audio and video recorded. Your name, address, and comments and any other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This will help our town clerk prepare accurate minutes and to create a record that is available to the general public, including the town's website. Questions about this collection should be directed to the town clerk at the town of Aurora. I will now ask the town clerk to confirm that notification to the public occurred as required by the Planning Act.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Respecting item 1, stable neighborhood study, a notice of public planning meeting was published in the Aurora Banner and Aurora newspapers and given by mail to all addressed property owners within the study area. The Planning Partnership's report was also published on the town's website and forwarded to the relevant ratepayers associations. Public notification has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I will now ask the Acting Director of Planning and Development Services to begin with the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have Mr. Ron Palmer here from the Planning Partnership, who will be making a presentation on the stable neighborhood study.
Thank you, Mr. Cook.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, it's a great pleasure to be back here in Aurora after a few years away. To begin my presentation tonight, I just want to talk a little bit about what I was asked to do, and then I'll go through what we did, what I did, and we'll talk a little bit about what my recommendations are going forward on this very interesting topic that is happening not only in the town of Aurora, but in all the municipalities that are feeling development pressure as a result of very substantial growth over the last few years. I was retained by town staff based on a council motion to have a look at the work that had been done by staff, to understand some of the public comments that had been received on that work, to familiarize myself with the 3 neighborhoods that are in question. And I also spoke to a number of other professionals from legal firms, from real estate advisory firms, from financial impact companies, and from my own urban designers that I have in-house. at the Planning Partnership. I am Ron Palmer, and I'm a principal at the Planning Partnership, and I've been a planning consultant in Ontario for just over 35 years. I am going to go through my findings tonight. I'm going to go fairly quickly over some things that you know better than me, and then as I get into some of the details of the work, I'll spend a little more time. First of all, we carried out some site visits. I was here on 2 separate occasions, and then someone from my firm was here on 2 additional days, driving around the neighborhoods, making notes, taking photos, trying to get a sense of the character of these areas. So we've prepared brief discussions about how we felt about each neighborhood. Regency Acres, we'll begin with that one. Typical of a 70s, 80s neighborhood, lots of space. The street rights-of-way are quite large. The front yard setbacks are quite large. There's breathing room in this community. Mature trees have a significant impact on how the community looks and feels. Built form is relatively consistent. It covers quite a large area. Curvilinear street pattern, crescents. Again, these are typical of the time when these neighborhoods and communities were built. Aurora Heights is similar. It's not the same, but it has similarities. It's of the same time period. Again, lots of mature trees, large setbacks, broad road right-of-way, modest built form, lots of breathing room. And again, that's a really important character-giving element, is that there is space, because today's neighborhoods, given requirements for provincial policy and density, feel much tighter. Again, a fairly significant area, curvilinear street pattern, crescents, cul-de-sacs. Town Park, totally different than the other 2. This is an extremely eclectic neighborhood that has evolved over a very long period of time. House forms, architecture, all very different. Lot sizes, setbacks, dealing with garages, all very different. Still a primarily residential community, but it does have other uses and other built forms incorporated into the context. A lovely neighborhood, mature trees, not quite as open as the other 2. Those are some preliminary feelings about what these neighborhoods are like. Again, Town Park, a much more connected grid pattern of streets, which has benefits and disbenefits in terms of traffic flow, but nonetheless different than the other 2. We had a look at a whole host of public comments. These are certainly not all of them, but these are some of them. I'm not going to get into them in any specificity, but there are a huge diversity of opinion on what should happen in these neighborhoods. There are some ratepayers who feel that the character-giving elements should be well understood and highly restricted, thereby protecting the existing feel of those neighborhoods. And there are others that say there should be some flexibility to permit new forms of development and different scales of development, and that in fact the existing zoning as it stands today does permit that. There were still others that were not quite at each end of that spectrum, that were talking about ways to think about the community, how to provide a balance between protecting the character-giving elements while still allowing innovation and investment. You're going to hear me say the word balance quite a few times tonight, because that's a really important concept when we talk about these stable neighborhoods, not just in Aurora, not just in these specific 3 neighborhoods, but really in all similar neighborhoods and similar communities across the GTA. Importantly, though, these are unique in Aurora and they are unique neighborhoods. And the great thing about them is people care about these neighborhoods. They want to live here. So that's a really important thing to remember. It's our job and your job to find the right balance between protection, innovation, and investment. Part of the work that was done by the municipality in the first study was to look at some of the things that other municipalities are doing. I added 2 more. The original report looked at Brampton, Halton Hills, and Newmarket. I added some additional flavor from Richmond Hill and Burlington. All of these communities, like you, are having conversations about what is compatible development, what is the right balance, what are the character-giving elements for each individual unique neighborhood, and how can they be appropriately conserved. So the report includes a discussion of what they've done, and again, it's not all old, so a lot of it is quite new, and they're still testing the boundaries of success. Particularly, I'm familiar with the city of Brampton. They're reviewing their entire zoning bylaw, and part of that is looking at the provisions in their stable neighborhoods, their existing neighborhoods, to make sure that what has been implemented is working and achieving the appropriate result. I also know that the town of Newmarket recently asked for proposals to do a complete and detailed study of all of their existing stable neighborhoods to determine exactly the kinds of things that you're thinking about through this process. Richmond Hill, a study that my firm did a few years ago, took a look at the downtown neighborhood, the one adjacent and to the west of Yonge Street, quite an eclectic neighborhood, and tried to find out what was it that people cherished in that neighborhood. And once you figure out what they cherish, it's how do you protect and conserve that. Burlington has quite a significant inventory of work that deals with the neighborhoods in that community. I believe they've done 3 what they call character area studies, and those studies produce very detailed guidelines that are specific to each neighborhood, and then those guidelines inform the zoning bylaw and the site plan approval process with very specific and context-appropriate regulatory regimes. So lots of ways to do it. Part of my job was to go through the elements of the zoning bylaw provisions that were proposed to this council prior to this meeting. And I've gone through each part, and I've made a bit of a conclusion about each one, which I'll go through right now. The first one is really an administrative one. How do you recognize a different zoning regime on different properties? They talk about adding a suffix to the zone category that recognizes the new zoning regulatory regime within each of these 3 neighborhoods. I say that may not be appropriate because council may determine that you want multiple zones to deal with the unique characteristics of each of the neighborhoods. So it could be more than one, not just one. So it's an appropriate thing to do generally, but it may be 3 different zoning regimes that you may wish to consider. Reducing the maximum building height from 10 meters to 9 meters, I think is an absolutely appropriate thing to do, mostly because the official plan, which I helped write with some of the members of this council, says 9 meters as a maximum. The zoning bylaw must conform, and it would be my opinion that it conforms better if the zoning bylaw says 9 meters. What's important about that, it's a maximum. So the zoning bylaw will still conform if it's less than 9 meters. But I think it's a good place to start, is to specifically and exactly conform to the official plan. There was discussion about how to measure height. There was talk of a way of measuring, not using the midpoint in a sloped roof. My concern is if you do that, you'll be promoting a flat roof because people will try to maximize GFA in the roof form. I would suggest that you continue to measure where there's a sloped roof to the midpoint and potentially have a different height limit, a lower height limit for a flat roof, recognizing that sloped roofs are part of the character of the neighborhood. There are some flat roof, but it's primarily sloped roof. Different in Town Park neighborhood, where the pitches tend to be steeper. The other two neighborhoods tend to have a flatter slope, but very few flat roofs. The sliding scale for lot coverage, I am concerned about lot coverage because there's a huge variance in lot sizes in these neighborhoods. And if it's a straight number that deals with lot coverage, some lots could accommodate extremely large footprints and still be within the 30%. So I'm a little bit concerned about the use of a percentage lot coverage as an effective tool for character. Same thing for accessory buildings, garages, and so on. I'm not comfortable with lot coverage in this context. And again, today, where lot sizes are much more uniform, it is a good piece of regulatory equipment. However, particularly in Town Park, there's a huge range of lot sizes. Driveway widths, limiting the driveway width, I think, is an appropriate thing to do. Certainly when you drive down the streets, the way parking is dealt with and the width of the driveway is part of the character. So I think that is an effective tool. And of course, the basic introduction of the basic site plan approval process, which you have already done, is appropriate and a great tool to help control the look and feel of buildings outside of what the zoning bylaw regulates. So those were the key elements of the zoning bylaw that you looked at before, plus the site plan. I do think that the proposed changes last time would moderate the scale somewhat in those neighborhoods. It is considered to be down zoning because you are taking away some of the development potential that was less constrained under current zoning. But there is still some flexibility to accommodate innovative house forms, larger houses, and additional investment. Again, the site plan review process, I think, is a fundamental tool and totally the right thing to do in these communities. Again, the key here and the message is whether or not you thought the proposed changes went far enough, it is an attempt to provide balance between control and flexibility, and that is fundamental, whatever that balance ultimately is. The ratepayers groups and some individual ratepayers provided a lot of different ideas about how to enhance the regulatory elements of a proposed new zoning bylaw. A lot of them are absolutely used in other municipalities, and some of them may work extremely well here. So I would never say any of them were inappropriate or incorrect. My only concern is, notwithstanding the tool, what are the numbers that go with it, and how much control or constraint are you exercising? So I think that depending on what this council wants to do, many of these tools that have been recommended by the ratepayers could in fact be extremely useful. I haven't done enough work for you to tell you which ones or what the numbers should be that go with them, but I don't think that there's any necessity to get rid of any of them until you've made a determination as to what you want to do. Again, when we read through the body of the comments, there's no consistent opinion that jumps out. There is a huge variety of opinion. There are, and this is specific to the proposals from the last time, there are some residents, including the ratepayers associations themselves, who feel that they would like to be much more restrictive in terms of what the development potential on an individual site should be. And again, as I mentioned, they made some recommendations. And again, I think the tools and the metrics are appropriate, but I don't know today whether or not the actual numbers that are included with their recommendations are correct, because I have not done enough work to test them. Again, a lot of the tools don't necessarily have to be zoning. They could be part of the site plan approval manual, and in fact, some of them are. There's also the official plan that could come into play. I like to think of looking at stable neighborhoods as having the right connectivity between what the official plan says, what the zoning bylaw says, and then how you're going to use site plan approval as a new tool here to improve the product that is built. One thing that's very important based on my experience and the experience of others that I will go to in a minute is that the less flexible you are, or if you want to call it the more restrictive you are, there are impacts. There are impacts on the marketability of the property, and there are impacts on the price. Mostly that comes from the fact that if you're shrink wrapping an existing built form on an existing lot, you remove the market that is looking to rebuild. And when you have a smaller market, it tends to have an impact on price. Again, balance. What is the right balance? So in my report, I identify some lawyers that I spoke to. My concern was in a regime where you're attempting or promoting an idea where existing as-of-right development approvals may be reduced. Do you have legal liability in terms of injurious affection or a simple loss of property value because you've reduced the development potential? The answer to that was no. You don't have a significant legal exposure to do it. So they felt that absolutely the municipality is well within its purview to do this. What it does do, though, if you start changing the zoning rules, you will have to look at all the buildings within those neighborhoods that are now becoming legal non-complying uses because of the change in the rules, which may have implications, but can be dealt with. The lawyers were anxious to tell me, based on the new Planning Act and the primacy of the official plan, that, again, the official plan should be looked at the same time as the zoning bylaw and site plan control to make sure everything fits together properly. Again, everything has to conform to the official plan, and that is a major test. Typically, the change in the rules for the LPAT over the Ontario Municipal Board focuses a lot on conformity with policy, much more than it used to, and that raises the importance of the official plan. The lawyers I spoke to thought that the site plan review process addition that you've already approved is a great idea and a wonderful way to implement more of the softer side of planning regulation, and particularly it gives you the opportunity to start talking about architectural design, architectural detail, even as far as building materials and color. We had an interesting conversation about the use of restrictive covenants. I, in my career, had the great fortune to do a fairly significant project in the city of Houston, Texas. They don't have a zoning bylaw. All development is regulated by restrictive covenants that are legal agreements among neighbors. The municipality is not involved, not subject to appeal. It's all just a group of neighbors getting together and preparing a restrictive covenant on the title of their property that regulates scale, landscape, built form, design. So that's a tool that's available here in Ontario as well. Doesn't involve you, but it's certainly a very powerful tool. I did meet with some fiscal and real estate market professionals. The fiscal side, the person I spoke to is an expert on financial impact. His career is primarily giving municipalities advice about planning decisions and how that affects property value, including property that the city or town may own. The real estate people that I spoke to, one is a real estate agent who talks about property value marketability, and the other one is a real estate consultant who doesn't sell property but provides real estate advice mostly to municipalities like yourself. They talk about balance and finding the right balance. Their thought is that you really need to make sure that you're not totally stifling innovation, investment, and change, but that there is some value in maintaining and conserving and promoting those really important character-giving elements that make the neighborhood a nice place to live. They do believe that redevelopment is investment, and that people will tend not to purchase a property with a 1,000 square foot bungalow, buy it, tear it down, and build a 1,000 square foot bungalow. They tend to buy it specifically with an upgrade in GFA in mind, and that is a very specific part of the market, and that tends to drive property value in neighborhoods that have development pressure, much like Aurora has been feeling over the last 15 or 20 years. So their opinions were that downzoning does have a negative impact, both in terms of property value and on the marketability of the site. They didn't go as far as to tell me whether that's a 5% impact or a 25% impact. They simply said there's an impact, a negative impact. So it's not quantified. Urban design, these were two folks who work with me in my office. One who spends his 50-year career at the former OMB, now at LPAT, usually working for ratepayers associations, fighting against significant development intrusions into their neighborhood. So their information is more about what's important, how can you quantify the tools that you might wish to use, and what has been effective over time. And again, they're very strong on the idea of design guidelines that then inform zoning and site plan. So from all of that, and based on my own experience over time, there's many, 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 many ways to conserve, protect the character-giving elements of a neighborhood. Typically, in the other municipalities that I looked at that have gone into huge amounts of detail, that's almost always supported by a very detailed study of the individual neighborhood, both to determine what it is that gives it the character and what the numbers are that need to go into the tools that will protect it. It is my opinion that what staff had recommended would have a moderating effect on the scale of development. However, I do think it could be improved. And it's really all about dealing with compatibility and finding the balance between control and flexibility. Again, I think you'll find that the public comments to date have been across the spectrum, with lots of people talking about greater control and lots of people talking about maintaining the flexibility. So somewhere in between, there is an answer that is correct. And that's, again, balance. What's the right balance? In my opinion, the three neighborhoods are different. And creating one zoning bylaw that affects them all will have an impact. But if you wish to go further than moderating the current permissions, that really requires zooming in on the details of those character-giving elements, identifying them, quantifying them, and putting them into zoning and site plan. It's very important to remember that even if you put in a new zoning regime and have guidelines, an individual property owner can always ask for a rezoning, apply for a rezoning, and can go through the committee of adjustment to change or a minor vary those regulatory elements. Having the studies, the work done, and the policy frameworks that support your zoning and your site plan process will go a long way in informing staff as to how they deal with rezoning applications in their planning reports to you, as well as the site plan approval process. So again, the connectivity between the official plan, the zoning bylaw, and the site plan approval process is really important, because that informs decisions about rezoning applications and minor variance applications. Notwithstanding there's a limited risk of legal liability, and the municipality has every right to do detailed zoning and regulatory elements to control development, it is important to remember that there is some negative impact of greater regulation. It's also important to remember that whatever you do, you are going to create legal non-compliance, and you'll have to come up with a strategy to make sure that legal non-compliance is not a significant hindrance to those property owners in terms of the long-term viability of their houses. I know on this slide it says conforming, but that's a different issue. It's compliance with the regulations that's the key. I'm a city planner, and I spend my life at public meetings, and I truly believe that it's out of the utmost importance to hear from the neighbors in these communities. You're hearing from some in different ways, but there will be a huge diversity of opinion. And before you make a decision, you should be aware, or as aware as possible, about what the broader community is thinking, because it's really them you're affecting. And it's important for them to understand what the implications are. Again, the more specific the regulations get, the more important the community consultation becomes. So just in closing, I have 2 or 3 more slides about what I've been recommending, and it's in a summary of what I have in my report. I think that you should proceed with the new zoning that would be for all 3 neighborhoods, with some minor adjustments that I talked about. I would try not to use lot coverage as a tool, but perhaps go with a limit on gross floor area as a tool that could be more effective. Height limit 9 meters, I think, is appropriate. It's a moderating bylaw. It does have some effect, but it's not so restrictive that it will have a huge impact on property value or marketability. In addition, I think you should proceed with the development of a council-approved design guideline document that would be relatively generic, but it would help articulate more specifically what it is that you're trying to control through site plan approval. In fact, the preparation of these guidelines is a requirement to use site plan approval to the full extent of the Planning Act. And that gets into architectural detail, color, and materials, which I think are actually important in these neighborhoods. So that is a prerequisite to be able to use site plan to the greatest extent possible. These are not outrageously detailed guidelines, but they certainly deal with material, style, color, landscape, etc. The next few recommendations are really only if you wish to go further and be more detailed and more specific. In that case, you should really study each of these neighborhoods on their own. Burlington calls them character areas, and they should be, you should drill down into the details of lot size, pattern, house style, built form, material, landscape, age of the trees, width of the road, the whole gamut, so that you fully understand what it is that makes these neighborhoods so desirable. And you can prepare neighborhood-specific guidelines and a regulatory regime that is very specific to the characteristics of those three neighborhoods. As another tool, only if you wish to go further, you could consider looking at the official plan and the definition of compatible development. The definition of compatible development that is in the official plan is a relatively standard definition that comes from years of testing it at the Ontario Municipal Board. That's the definition they use. If you don't like the definition, it's not really the definition you don't like, it's the word compatible development you don't like. But that doesn't mean you have to use compatible development. You could consider different words in the body of the official plan, like consistent with or similar to, or words like that, which have a very different meaning and can be quantified in a very different way. Depending on how much regulation and how more restrictive you want to get, more restriction, the more legal non-compliance you're going to create within the neighborhoods. And at that point, it becomes really important to do something about it. Either exempt them from the bylaw, zone them in their own category, or deal with them generically with definitions about legal non-compliance that goes back to identifying the date when they were built and the fact that they complied when they were built. There's lots of ways to deal with it, but it's something that you can't lose sight of, because you'll find that there'll be many more legal non-complying uses the more restrictive that you get. My last one, you've already heard. The more restrictive you go, the deeper dive you take, the more important public consultation becomes. And it's really, really important to get it right. It's a fundamental element of planning, as you know, and people need to have a say in what you're doing, and you need to hear from everybody. With that, I believe I have one more. A flow chart. You've already done site plan. You can do recommendation 1 and 2 relatively quickly and relatively easily. 3, 4, and 5, and of course the implementation that goes with it, are a different level of commitment and a different level of work that would justify restrictive planning regimes that are more restrictive than what is before you. In my opinion, you can do 1 and 2 fairly quickly with the adjustments that I've suggested, and that will have an impact. So with that, my presentation is over, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll get to the questions from council after we have the public come up. First, we get the public to come up. Councillor Gallo. So thank you very much. So now I'll ask any members of the public that would like to come up and speak. Don't be shy. Right. So first, if I get your name, state your address, and you have 5 minutes, and you'll hear a chime when there's 1 minute remaining.
Good evening, members of council. Congratulations, all of you. I know it was a lot of hard work for this election, so congratulations. I do have a couple of questions of Mr. Palmer. You referred to in your presentation, and thank you for that, but you kept referring to 3 neighborhoods. Who did the map for the town of Aurora showing the 3 neighborhoods?
We'll ask the questions at the end after we get through everyone. So
the reason I'm asking that question is that we're talking about 5 neighborhoods, yet the town map is only showing 3. Now, that has been since August of last year, so I'm curious as to what neighborhoods you were in. As well as that, did you speak to the ratepayers groups? You stated that you spoke to residents, and I'm wondering, did you speak to the ratepayers groups directly, ask them questions, and consult? And that's it for now.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm here speaking on behalf of the Regency Acres Ratepayers Association, and I live at 46 Holman Crescent. Our association is pleased that Council hired a consultant to help the town find a way to address the contentious issues related to the redevelopment now occurring in Regency Acres, Aurora Heights, and the Town Park area. This redevelopment has been contentious because to many residents it contradicts Aurora's provincially approved official plan. Our town's plan emphasizes the importance of protecting stable neighborhoods by ensuring that redevelopment is compatible in building scale and design and respects the existing physical character of our stable communities. The report prepared by the Planning Partnership states that their recommendations will identify a number of planning approaches available to the municipality that can help to find a balance, and this is an important word that we agree with, between protecting those character-giving elements that make these neighborhoods attractive places to live and providing flexibility needed to support innovation and ongoing investment as these neighborhoods continue to evolve. While we are pleased with the overall direction of the report's recommendations, we have some significant concerns. We support immediately proceeding with recommendation 1 to approve new zoning bylaws. Height in these areas should be no more than 9 meters to align with our official plan. That said, our view is that height should be measured to the peak of the roof, as is done by a number of other municipalities, and a separate lower limit should be put in place for flat roof design homes. We would also like to see some specific examples showing how lot coverage limits would compare to the maximum floor area measure if the zoning changes were to go with the latter approach. In our view, step 2 should be to implement recommendations 2 and 3 concurrently. We were having some difficulty kind of differentiating those two. They seem to be so interconnected and involve identifying key character features of each neighborhood. These features should lead ideally to design guidelines for each area because each area is quite distinct, as Council has previously noted. Community input is critical in that process. Our recommendation and hope would be that an advisory committee would be struck with representation from the 3 ratepayers groups to participate in that process. There's a key thing I'd like to emphasize. There seems to be a misperception that the 3 stable neighborhood associations are trying to stifle redevelopment. This has never been our intent. Our past delegations at Council have consistently focused on finding the balance between neighborhood renewal and the preservation of neighborhood character. Our goal as an association is identical to the stated vision for stable neighborhoods that is clearly articulated in our official plan. We have consistently asked Council to revise zoning bylaws to support our plan's vision and to do what the Provincial Planning Act requires in order to ensure consistency. There's also a misperception that the zoning bylaw changes that we have asked for represent a radical departure from Aurora's current bylaws and the zoning bylaws in other communities, and further that these requested changes are so radical that they will adversely affect real estate values. The unfortunate fact is that the consultant's report seems to, in our opinion, stoke these fears by overemphasizing the opinion of 3 individuals from 2 firms that deal primarily with commercial real estate, as nearly as we can see, and whose client base includes major developers. The potential risk of downzoning is restated on 8 separate pages in the report. This repetition serves, in my view, in our view, to magnify the potential risks in the absence of actual numbers and evidence. The changes our associations have asked for are far from radical and are in line with many that other towns and cities have already done for their mature neighborhoods. The consultant's report states that the metrics of the ratepayers' approaches for their neighborhoods have merit and most have been dealt with in other jurisdictions. There is nothing in what we have requested that would prevent homeowners from building substantial additions to their homes or prevent developers from building modern homes that are much larger and higher than neighboring homes. We are simply asking for a balance and alignment with the official plan. The consultant's report provides no evidence regarding the impact of downzoning on the real estate market in other communities that have already implemented similar changes. This is a serious flaw in our view. If it is deemed necessary by Council, such an analysis should be undertaken by an independent expert with no vested interest in the real estate business, such as university-based economists or urban planners. We have not come across any media coverage or feedback from the planning staff we have spoken to in other municipalities to suggest that the real estate market was adversely impacted when they implemented downzoning. Aurora will continue to be a highly desirable area due to its location, access to transit, and community character. And given the shortage of land in the GTA, mature neighborhoods like ours will continue to be attractive to developers because of their lot size. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hold it. Folks, applause, please. Thank you. We can get your name and your address, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Adam Mobbs. I live at 130 Heathwood Heights Drive. I'm just putting something on the screen there. I'm representing the Aurora Heights Ratepayers Association. We appreciate the perspectives brought forward in the staff and accompanying consultant report. This is a positive step in the right direction. I'm here to tell you today a story about the Aurora Heights neighborhood, a small community, approximately 1,000 homes. Many homeowners still live in the area. Original homeowners still live in the area. They remember the days of raising their children, grandchildren, and in some cases, great-grandchildren. They consider these homes, not houses. There's a healthy mix of diversity and age of the homeowners. Generally speaking, there is an aging population. The area offers a mix of affordable housing. Working with the planning department, we were provided a list of approximately 70 registered secondary suites. We estimate another 20 to 40 or even more unregistered secondary suites within the area, bringing the total to over 100. Or better put, this represents 10% of the overall housing stock. Like our colleagues, we are a progressive ratepayers association determined to work with and reflect the aggregate thoughts of the community. We are rather confident that we do not want the same scale and proportion of homes found on Child and Fenway. The community may not appear to be as spirited as our friends to the south, though this is a good thing. We have not seen the same scale and magnitude as the houses seen in the Regency Heights, Regency Acres area. We wish to take a more proactive approach. We know what we do not want. We do not want these homes. Though, to be quite honest, we're struggling to know exactly what we do want. We understand both the need to protect and evolve the neighborhood. Both are important to the long-term sustainability. Thus, we set out a task to determine exactly what is appropriate development, as determined by our community. We want to know exactly where the line is appropriately drawn between protection and evolution. To begin, we started by taking an inventory of the current housing stock. We journeyed out on a brisk, sunny afternoon, complete with a laser measure, literally a laser measure, clipboard, and sharpened pencil. We found out the area consists of 5 models: a bungalow, back split, side split, both a 2- and 3-bedroom option, and a raised bungalow. There are a few, not many, 2-story homes as well, though they're not included in the calculations I'm about to provide. They're very similar to the side split model. This slide provides an example of the current inventory, average inventory. Average square footage is approximately 1,050 square feet. Average lot coverage, approximately 13.25%. Average height to the peak, approximately 4.57 meters. To understand what we consider appropriate, we then looked at new developments in the area. Special thanks to the Planning Department for providing this information. It is public information. All new developments that I'm about to go over conform to the current zoning bylaw. Interesting enough, with one small exception, they also conform to the new zoning requirements put forward by the consultant. They also, interesting enough, comply with the previous recommendation of 30% lot coverage. I'm listing them in order of square footage from smallest to largest. Example number 1. So when you look at these and you're thinking about a monster home, different people define it different ways. This will sort of help provide a visual. Foundation footprint, 1,710 square feet. Lot coverage, 24%. Height to the top of the roof, to the midpoint, 7.7 meters. Example 2. Foundation footprint, 1,512 square feet. Coverage, 22.8%. Height to the midpoint, 6.73 meters. And I won't read out every other one, but I'll show you a few more. So when you look at this is interesting how people define this home. Mr. Mayor, members of council, I do have a few recommendations on behalf of the Ratepayers Association, though I'm going to wait because it'll take just over a minute, probably another 95 seconds. So I'll reserve that till later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mobbs. Neil, if you can state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes, sir.
It's Neil Aslan, and I live on Royal Road in the Town Park area. Firstly, I'd like to thank the consultant for his presentation. I found it very helpful in clarifying a few things that I wasn't sure about. Mr. Mayor, council, staff, hello. I've been asked by the Town Park Resident Ratepayers Association to speak to the report. And firstly, I would like to address where the study concludes with number 9 on page 25, that property values could be reduced because future development potential is limited and marketability is reduced. Perhaps this will be the most polarizing point that will come to light this evening. While I understand that zoning changes will undoubtedly provoke a visceral response, I do feel it requires further reflection. I advise council to use caution here. Arguments like this are easy to make and can be used as a battering ram to the whole subject of protecting our stable neighborhoods, especially when, as my previous colleague suggested, when there's no empirical evidence. The concerns of my fellow residents that are worried about the value of their property are legitimate, but it would be foolish to think that those of us seeking protections for our neighborhood do not see the financial impact of reckless, unbridled redevelopment that is allowing for a cacophony of out-of-scale monster homes that are disrupting the order of our streetscape. I too am concerned about the value of my home, but I find that the research used in the study to be a little bit thin. Any protections should be measured and thoughtful. Going forward, I was asked council to move on recommendation 1 immediately, and we all know what that is. I won't continue with that. I'll move on. Number 3 on page 23 states that the proposed changes are an attempt to achieve a balance between encouraging innovation and ongoing investment, while also protecting key character-giving elements. I believe that this is the essence of what we have been asking for. By seeking bylaws that align with Section 8 of our official plan, we have always argued and maintained that we encourage development and recognize it as a key to revitalization of older neighborhoods such as ours. What we're asking for is to do so in a way that is smart and protective to the attributes that distinguish them from other neighborhoods in town, while being non-restrictive to future development and investment. The study speaks to innovation, and I would like to comment that innovation has no correlation to out-of-scale development. That is to say that the larger the house, the taller the roof, the greater the number of garages, does not qualify as innovative. In my 30-plus years as a design professional, I have worked directly with architects, product developers, and scholars. I regularly read and refer to trade journals as part of what I do for a living. Let me assure you that what I see being built, for the most part, not all, is not innovative. While current new builds may be using innovative technology and mechanical systems and materials in their construction, I argue that these are matters of concern for ISO, the International Standards Organization, and the OBC, the Ontario Building Code. Scale is the single most impactful feature that is creating the disruption. It manifests itself in the third dimension. This is not a story of taste or visual aesthetics. It is about a simple formula, length times width times height. It stands to reason that through skilled architectural manipulation of these basic elements, we can control the scale while still providing enough volume for human shelter. The official plan seeks to modify these basic measurements as non-restrictive, protective measures for mature neighborhoods. Furthermore, controlling the scale will not affect the innovation factor of infill development, and I may go as far to argue that it may bring along, as a consequence, more innovative solutions. There is a large talent pool in the design field, and we should at this point be attracting them and those that can offer the best solutions. What we're asking for is a higher standard in our neighborhoods, which can only add value as a result. There are rare and concrete examples in all three neighborhoods where homes have been built, rebuilt, or modified to suit the needs of our contemporary lives and meet current standards of construction that do not adversely contradict the current context of the neighborhood. Only by having a set of bylaws that ensure compliance will we expect to have value added to our already desirable neighborhoods. The study clearly states that we should follow the official plan. That is why we have this official plan. That is why I stand here tonight for the fourth time. Tonight, I ask that you move on recommendation 1 of the report and seek to change the bylaws that will be compliant with our official plan, and henceforth, after more prudent study, move to further refine protections that are non-restrictive, as stated in recommendations 2 and 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Welcome. If you could state your name and your address, and you have 5 minutes.
Jim McCart, 35 Child Drive. First, I commend the town for hiring an expert, and his experts too, who he used to complete his study. Now, my opinion. Everyone wants full value for their home when they decide to sell it. If development is too restrictive, according to information from the Stable Neighborhood Study, the value of properties will stagnate, and that's in the report, I believe, from the consultant. This will make them attractive to investors who will put multiple units in them, which in some cases are very unkept. If anyone on council would like to walk down my street in the summer, I can show you them. And therefore, depreciating the market value in the neighborhood, because if a person comes looking at a house to buy it and they see an unkept one in the neighborhood, that would be a turn-off right away, that the person might not want to live there. Multiple living accommodations also increase the cost to the town for garbage services and other services such. They'll be collecting from 2 or 3 homes instead of 1, and it also creates parking problems too, like street parking, parking on the lawn, and safety concerns for children going to school if they have to pass between parked cars on the street. And in closing, I've been at other meetings here and people complain about their sunlight being blocked. Well, every day when I get up and the sun is visible, it comes in the east, In the middle of the day, it goes to the south, and then in the afternoon, it's in the west, so they cannot be totally blocked for the entire day from the sun. And thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Respect you all.
Welcome. If you can state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes, sir.
Good evening. Ron Cocking, 13 Holman Crescent. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm a lifelong Auroran. I'm born here. I've lived here since 1965. My life in this town has been one of constant change and evolution. This town is not the same town that I grew up in. It's very different. There are very different people here, and there are very different needs in this community. That's kind of the way life goes in the world. I've lived in many neighborhoods. In fact, I've lived in 2 of the neighborhoods that are impacted here by the staple neighborhoods. And I've lived in heritage neighborhoods and been all over town. My view is if we are too restrictive in the covenants that we put forth in the staple neighborhood, we are going to impact the value of our properties. My neighbors, the folks that I'm speaking with, we all believe that we're going to be affected if we curtail development. I'm not looking for, people to come in here and buy our houses and move in. Families don't buy the houses in Regency Acres. Okay, we're seeing that. We haven't seen a family buy a house really and move into our neighborhood in a long time. We're seeing developers, fair enough. We're seeing people buy and turn them into rental properties. No issue with that either. The problem becomes if we don't continue to allow development and growth in the neighborhood is going to stagnate. And we're going to run into issues in the neighborhood that we're seeing some right now. They're being dealt with as they happen, but they're impactful. The neighborhood is not the same neighborhood that my family moved into in 2002, 2004. If we do this approach, counter to what others are saying, I believe that Mr. Palmer did go and task experts on the impact of downzoning. I do believe that they're credible people, that they've provided input, that they know and understand. Perhaps they'll take more study, but it is indicated that that's a fact. One of the challenges I'm concerned about, typically you would say you've never seen me here at your council meeting before because I don't really come before you. My concern is there's a voice that's being spoken for my neighborhood that doesn't represent me. I'm not aware of the Ratepayers Association for a long time. I understand why it's come together. Perhaps I was unavailable when they came and tried to contact me to join the Ratepayers Association, but it doesn't represent me and I'm not part of it. I don't know who is. I've researched it. I can't find them. I can see them in the newspaper making statements. I can see them in council minutes making statements, but I haven't seen them come to my door. I don't know how to get a hold of them and become connected to them. So they do not represent my voice or the voice of many folks in the room. I think it's important.
Oh, everybody, please.
I think it's important that you hear all sides of the stories. I believe you have a very tough decision ahead of you. I hope you're very careful. I hope you take Mr. Palmer's advice and go into more detailed studies and come up with a clear answer that defines what we're going to do as we go forward, but doesn't put our properties at peril. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Halt. No applause, everyone, please. Please hold the applause. Thank you. Welcome. You can state your name and your address. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Doug McPherson, 33 Cossar Drive. I'm not near as educated as some of the people that have spoke before, but much the same thing. I've been in town for a good number of years, and there's a fear in our neighborhood. That fear is what we've seen in 1, 2, 3, 4 houses being built that actually shadow the neighbors out. They don't get sun in the morning or the afternoons. And we're just getting monster homes, and their fear is what's coming. It'll be like the real estate agent that approached my door the other day and didn't ask me anything, just told me that she'd sold my house. Offered me a number. Not interested because we have a great neighborhood. Our neighbors are all together. We clean our own driveways. We do our own lawns. Each other's lawns as necessary. Help them out. But that fear is there. And going forward, that is scaring them. And I don't blame them. We're a fairly small bungalow-sized street with a few 2 stories. But when you get around the corner and walk into that house where you have to look way up, is a fear. Anyways, all I have to say, and I think I heard the same words in a much more technical form go on here, and just being a simple mechanic, I can fix your engine or transmission, but I don't understand a lot of what they talked about. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Next, welcome. If you can state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes, sir.
I'm Yorma Taki, 19 Seaton Drive. I am totally opposed to this new bylaw you're trying to pass. It's going to, these are older homes, 50, 60 years old homes in there, and they all need so much renovation. There's no insulations, there's electrical is shot in these buildings. Wherever I look at these old homes, they do not meet the new building code, not even close. It'll cost more to renovate than put a new building up. Guy spent $150,000 on renovation, trying to bring it up to building code. Very small house, but I want to see the old ones. If you can't afford the reno, let people build any house size they want. There's too much red tape with this new bylaw, and people can't get anything done. It's other people dictating what you can build, what you can have. And it will put the prices down, and people are not going to buy these small homes. Let's say there's a couple. They want to have children, and they want to restrict the driveway 10 feet wide and so long. Now, the kids grow up, teenagers, they want to have a car. You can't get 3 cars in this driveway. Where are they going to park? So you have to build up a little higher and have that space for it. I've seen it happen all the time out there. Nobody can park their cars. Because, you know, when the kids start growing up, they want their own bedroom and a little bungalow. They want their own rooms. They want their own space. So we got to give them some space to build a second story. And now I heard they don't want a balcony on a second story. Now, if you think about it, there's a fire in the building. You see most new development, they have a second story. That is a fire escape. They can go to that balcony and, well, the fire guys can put their ladder up there. You have to have the health and safety factor on it. So you need those exterior balconies, just for the fire code. I'm telling you, if I checked all those houses out there in my neighborhood, the electrical systems would not pass. I've had mine done, and they are so old. These houses are 50, 60 years old, and they're not being maintained. And there's no insulation in these houses. So let's let people build something to our new building codes, and then you got a great house. Like I said, the younger people, when they want to have a family, the house is going to be too small for them. That's all I got to say. And it'll put the price down, and they're going to be rented out because they're not going to be able to sell these little homes. And they're not maintained. That's all I got to say. Too much red tape. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, on the applause, everyone. I've asked 3 times. We don't applause during meetings, so we appreciate the passion everyone has. Next. Thank you for coming. If you can state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes, ma'am.
Okay, it's Allison Halls. I live on Big One Drive in Aurora. I'm part of the Aurora Heights Ratepayers Association. One correction on the consultant's report and the information that our group provided to the mayor. There's an error, so I don't know when you want me to point that out, but I just wanted to mention that now. I guess it was transposing numbers, maybe. I want to talk about a couple different things relevant to the report. The official plan says that it's good to protect stable neighborhoods so that we can have secondary suites available for rentals to have diversity in the different neighborhoods. And then they talk about, significantly, as already been mentioned, marketability and property values. So I've lived in my house, let's say 25 years. I've seen families move in. I've seen families move out. I've seen seniors come from much larger homes and move into our neighborhoods. And I've seen single homeowners buy into our neighborhood. Some of them renovate, some of them don't. Some add additions on the back. Others just live as they are. So I don't see anything that's going to cause the neighborhood to fall into disrepair. It's been around for 51 years and it's not falling apart. Before the big boom of real estate that we had for a couple of years, the houses were turning over at a normal rate. My property has continued to appreciate over the years. I can attest to that from the MPAC information that I get on how much it's worth. So it has not decreased in value. It's held its value, if not appreciated in value. As far as technology goes, I have a house that's been insulated. It has green energy. It has solar hot water. It has a number of new technologies in it, and it's still the same house that I bought in the sense that I have not enlarged it. I've only improved upon it, and it didn't cost me $150,000 or anything near to that so far. The other thing I find, the term of downzoning, I think, is kind of an offensive term. My understanding from all the discussions we had last year, the reason why we engaged a consultant was to look at what we need to do to adjust the zoning in all three of these neighborhoods because it didn't align with the official plan. And the question came to be, okay, so what are our options? There was a document that was put forward last year to a council that was from Oakville, which provides a lot of information on not only visually but verbally in text as far as what can be done for design and everything else, and it's very helpful because it's easy to understand. So rather than undertake recreating the wheel, it might be helpful if we can use that information and make it applicable to Aurora. I don't think it's fair to suggest that we're going to lose property value by having rentals. In fact, we have more rentals in my neighborhood now since the boom when we had speculators buying those properties and foreign buyers buying those properties and not wanting to live in them than we ever have in the years that I've been there. We had secondary suites being rented, but we didn't have whole properties being rented out with the owners being, I don't know where because I've never seen them. So that real estate boom caused more than just monster homes. It caused people to buy homes and not live in them, but just use them as rental properties, which is fine. It's just that if the official plan wants to keep those neighborhoods stable so that they encourage secondary suites and have homeowners living in the homes, then we're not achieving that with what's been going on recently. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. If you can state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes, sir.
My name's Sean Zeldin. I live at 1 Camano Road. I bought my house 20 years ago. I bought it as an investment property. I saw what was going on in Leaside at that time, homes similar to mine. I also drove around the neighborhood and I saw areas where there were bigger homes, and I said, one day this will happen here. I did look at the bylaws at that time when I purchased the home, and I've actually been waiting for some time now for a decision on this because I have plans, and because I need a minor variance, I've been put on hold. As an investor, I can tell you that if there were stricter conditions like we're talking about, I would not buy a home in this neighborhood. And I understand there'll always be people that will buy those homes, but like one of the gentlemen earlier said, these houses do not have insulation. The electrical systems in the house they don't have enough receptacles. They're not grounded. In some of them, mine, I did some work there, the drainage pipes underneath the house are rotten and seep into the soil. So they need a lot of work. So for somebody to come in and buy a 1,000 square foot bungalow and renovate it properly, it just won't make sense. That's not what people are looking for as investors. So I feel pretty confident saying you won't see investment in the area. Will you have downsizers? Maybe. Will it stagnate? I don't know if anyone knows for sure. I would guess it would. I'll tell you that if these bylaws go through, my house is going up for sale immediately. On my street, I know of three investment properties that people have rented them out, and I see them and how they're going down. Just the way they're capped, all the cars in the driveway, that's what I see this neighborhood turning into. The height I do believe in making some restrictions. I understand, I don't know where it all started, but I understand there was a house built on Child that was 6,000 square foot. It sounds, you know, a little, not more than a little over the top. When you talk about the height restriction, my concern there is today, if I buy a condo that's 500 square feet, the ceilings are 9 or 10 feet high. It's just how we build today. It's not 1960 or 1970 where that's when these neighborhoods were built. People don't, you know, maybe some older people, but I don't know how we, you know, to stand in the way of progress. If somebody wants to build a house today, they want 9 or 10 foot ceilings. That's what they want. They also don't want to be told what kind of materials they should use. So if we change these bylaws, that's what we're eliminating. Leaside is a gorgeous neighborhood, and they let the progress happen. I just hope that council thinks about this as well, of the future of these neighborhoods and what they could be. My lawyer, because I was thinking of selling a while ago, you know what he said to me about Aurora? He said, Aurora is the big secret. And I said, why? He says, because you can still buy a house with a lot there and build. That's all.
Thank you. Welcome. If you can state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name is Michael Palmieri. I live at 39 Glass Drive. I'm here also opposed to these bylaws that want to be changed, the restriction with the down zoning. It can only have a negative effect on the values of the property and a negative effect on the market in itself. Regarding just Aurora being a place that's going to be growing and having young families moving into these neighborhoods. We have schools in the neighborhood that are at half capacity. They're thinking of taking one down because they just don't have children in my neighborhood to fill up both of the schools. So they're thinking of taking one down and then just to fill up the other schools. So that just goes to show you the people that are buying in the area, the homes are small, they're old, they need to be upgraded, but they're still too small for families. So having newer homes being built in the area will bring up the value, but the down zoning and the fact that people that live in the area that have bought there with an understanding that the area will grow and not stagnate, these are people that are retirement. They don't. When you sell your home, you don't care who you sell your home to, as long as you always go for the best deal you can. Usually, it's the best price. Sometimes it's a closing, but it's 99% of the time it's always price. So. The value of the area going down and just the market itself going down and just having Aurora being restricted and even putting provisions in the bylaw, you could end up with 1,000 appeals that would just, you know, that council would have to deal with. The other thing I have to say is this motion was defeated last year, and now it's been brought up again. We'd like to know who brought it up. And for what purpose is it brought up forth again? Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. If you can state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes, sir.
I'm Peter DeMille, and I live at 32 Child Drive. My wife and I have lived in Aurora for 41 years and 38 years at this address on Child Drive. We've raised our family here, made lots of changes to the house. When we moved into this house, we've used it as a retirement fund because we don't have any pension plan from a job to fund our retirement, our future retirement. If these controls and restrictions on our neighborhood buildings are put in place, it will reduce the value of the property. And that is like stealing money out of our pockets. Whether you're using the equity to fund your retirement or selling it to build a retirement cottage, it's not right to put restrictions in place that artificially reduce the value of a property. How can you say you can do something in one area but not in another area? Houses are not The houses in the area and Regency are not perfect. Some of them do need changes to make them livable, like insulation, like people have been saying. It's very true. Whether it's a new family or a retiree, if you make it tough to renovate, people will just rent them out instead. More of these houses are being turned into rental units all the time, but they're not being kept up. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra, we're going to go through everyone once, and then I'll ask for a second time. Thank you. If you could state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Matthew Kinsella, my wife Tracy. We're residents in the Town Park neighborhood, and we're going to speak primarily about the Town Park neighborhood and how the stable neighborhood has affected it. For the past 20 years, I've been an infill builder in the city of Toronto, doing new homes as well as historical restorations. I have a unique perspective when it comes to the Town Park neighborhood and some of the changes that have occurred, including the monster homes that are being built. Town Park is rich with history, architecture, and diversity, and I think we would all agree that this is what we want to preserve and enhance. I reviewed the stable neighborhood study, and as a developer with some experience, I understand many of the complexities facing the town as well as the residents. I understand why so many neighbors are concerned about the new housing infill and how it's changed the streetscapes. I agree with many of those neighbors that most of the new housing is incompatible in style, size, and built form with the existing housing stock. So how then do we manage this change in a way that's both progressive and respective to that which is already there? The study discussing this downsizing, and this can be a very effective tool. However, it can also have adverse effect on homeowners. I want to focus primarily on the Town Park area, which was developed between 1855 and about 1955. As such, there's a variety of architectural styles, lot sizes, and therefore there's no one-size-fits-all solution. In order to fairly safeguard the neighborhood, we have to look at it with a different approach to that of the other neighborhoods. As an example, our home at 23 Mosley Street was one of the first homes built by the city's founder, Mr. Joseph Fleury, in 1856. The house was very small, and most people would have decided to demolish it in favor of a newer home. My wife and I decided that we would restore the home and put an addition on it. We worked with the town through the Heritage Advisory Committee as well as the Committee of Adjustment, and were able to strike a balance that worked for us as a family. Today, we think the result embodies the history of the Town Park neighborhood. So why, do you ask, does this example matter? It would be wrong to impose downsizing as a solution over the whole Town Park neighborhood. This would discourage people from working with their existing houses. If we truly want to preserve the good housing stock of that neighborhood, we need to encourage people to save, restore, and add on. In order to do this, we need zoning changes that will promote this. I feel that some minor adjustments to the zoning in the Town Park neighborhood is all that's needed. This will ensure the preservation and improvement of the existing housing stock. This will ultimately save more of the homes and will not have a negative impact on the current owner's home values, which is a problem that can arise from the downzoning. As for the demolition of homes in favor of new homes, there are ways that this council and the town can deal with that through zoning changes. Some new zoning changes will allow homes that will be more compatible, smaller built form, different style and size. The new zoning will allow progress while respecting existing neighborhoods. The changes to the Town Park zoning should focus on demolition and new construction applicants. Most of these applicants will be developers familiar with the process, so it won't be too arduous. We need to try and encourage homeowners in the Town Park area to save and restore and expand so that their homes fit in today's living. We don't want to make zoning changes that will leave people in a legal, non-conforming limbo, where all the homeowners in the Town Park area, if they want to make any changes, will need to go through the arduous process of Committee of Adjustment and other complicated things. Town Park is a neighborhood in transition with the restoration of the Armory, revitalization of the Yonge Street corridor, and the hotly anticipated Library Square. With this progress and change, we must ensure that the current housing stock of Town Park is permitted to grow, and that good positive growth in the area will ensure Town Park remains the heart of Aurora. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome. If you could state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes, ma'am.
Sharon Hennig. I live at 18 Mosley Street, and I guess my neighbor across the street was just speaking. I'm new to Aurora, And unlike, I think, all of the previous speakers, I'm not a homeowner. I'm renting. And I would like to say I am a landscape designer. However, my approach to renting is to keep up the property and improve it. So I've had a lot of fun in the small garden in front of my small house. So my question is, what protections are there for houses like mine, which is tiny? It's probably less than 1,000 square feet living space. To my mind, it's a heritage home. I don't know if it's been designated as such. I know that it is about 160 years old. And I moved to Toronto, or I moved to Aurora from Toronto to find a place that I could afford to rent that would allow me access to my family, my granddaughter, and also give me a place that has charm and is a joy to live in. And I really enjoy the neighborhood where I am, which is Town Park. I'm very close to Yonge Street and the library. I'm very close to the farmers market, and I enjoy the architecture around the neighborhood. And I do recognize other older homes as well, sort of in the relative vintage of mine. So my question is there protection within these bylaws or otherwise for homes such as mine, which have unique and old architecture, which I feel should be preserved? And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. If you could state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Trish Meehan, and this is my husband, John Meehan. We live at 80 Victoria Street, and thank you for the opportunity tonight. I just wanted to share an experience with you. We moved to Aurora about 2 years ago and purchased a historic home, which we thought for our family would require some renovations. We did build an addition and as well as a garage, and through those renovations, we were required to have both permits and also go to Committee of Adjustments and work with the Historic Board. We had a good experience. It was a little bit of back and forth, and again, we come back to balance. But ultimately, we ended up with a home that we think is very fitting with the neighborhood. We appreciated the historic look and feel of all the buildings in the neighborhood, and we tried to stay within those guidelines. And because of that, I'm concerned tonight that some of the regulations that are being proposed, that we wouldn't be able to do what we did today. And with that said, that means that our house would not exactly be a home that our family would be able to live in. So my ask today is just to please consider that a lot of the homes in the neighborhoods do require renovations for families to live today. We live differently than they did back in the early 1900s. And just keep an open mind, because our experience with the process in Aurora was a good one, and we came out with a product that we feel really represents the neighborhood as well as the way our family lives today. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. If you can state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes.
Anna Croplin, 54 Harrison Avenue, Aurora, Ontario, Canada, Earth. I'm just going to make it short and sweet. I am on the ratepayers in the town park, and we've been working with the other ratepayers. We represent 3 ratepayers groups. We've been working with staff, with council, with all our ratepayers as well. I'm speaking as an individual. We've been going through these hoops for 2 years now. We have been educating ourselves in all the elements that have been affecting us. I know personally the monster home builds have affected me personally. I've lost 70-year-old trees in the process, and I didn't get much help from the town for protections. So basically my message is to you that the official plan already states protections for stable neighborhoods. We simply want the 50-year-old bylaws to be in alignment with the official plan, which is mandated provincially. Thank you. Drop the mic.
Thank you. If you could state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes, sir.
Frank D'Amico, 1 Gilbert Drive, Aurora. I've been living in Aurora for about 38 years. I'd like to ask one question. What do people consider a stable neighborhood? You guys have identified 2 areas, and the third area being the park area, which I don't feel should be part of this whole situation. Because you have the north end, which is the Royal Heights, I believe you call it, in the Regency area. This is basically known as more the lower end housing prices for years. So why we pick those poor people that have those homes there? Why don't we change this whole bylaw for the whole town? Why should Regency Acre go down to, say, at 30% coverage or 22% coverage, where George Street has 35% coverage? Like, I built on Hillview 4 or 5 houses there when I first started. I had the same kind of problems. Could get out of town, a monster home, but I was building by the bylaw. And I'll tell you one little story, then I'll get out of here. One woman there was fighting me every day. Bylaw, calling the bylaw guy. I'm doing everything by the law. And I said to her, listen, if you don't like it here, I'll buy you out. It was 7 years ago. I bought my first lot there for $330,000. And I said to her, if you want to really leave, I'll give you $350 for your lot, and so you don't have to worry about all this anymore. She said, no, the only way I'm going to leave here is in a box. I said, okay, no problem. Well, guess what? Last year she called me. She's not in a box, but she's moving out. She said, Frank, would you buy my property? I could be interested. What are you looking for? She says, back then it was $330,000. She wanted $350,000. And she wouldn't take $350,000, but she just wanted to move. She said, well, $1,395,000 now. I said, wow, you really come a long way after 7 years. I did give her an offer for just under $1,200,000. Another builder beat me out at $1,300,000. That's only 5 months ago. After that, she gave me a call and said, Frank, I really appreciate you didn't give in to my horse manure back 7 years ago, because now my 2 dumb sons, both are going to get $400,000 each, and I can live in my senior home I bought on Leslie. This bylaw, if you're going to change the bylaw, this changes bylaw, shouldn't just pick on poor region or Aurora. Got to kick the whole town. Why should they suffer? Seriously, why? If I was lucky enough to buy on George Street, wow, they didn't touch that area. I can get my 35% coverage there, 10-foot meters, the center line. I can build my 5,000-6,000 square foot home. But the guy on Regency, on Child or Knowles, on these places, poor guy. We're going to just beat him up. He's been beat up all his life. Now, because the main asset he has, most people, that's their asset, is their home. And what you're doing to it, kick him in the you know where, by changing this bylaw, because you're not going to be able to sell them. I wouldn't buy it. No way. I mean, nobody wants me. And as a builder, I have choices. I can go to Oakville. I can go anywhere. I live in Aurora. I love Aurora. But I wouldn't buy any lots in those areas now. And I know for right now, there's 30 houses that have been bought by not Canadians. Somehow Canadians can't afford to buy anything anymore. The way the way the mortgage situation is today, nobody can afford it. It's the Iranians and the Chinese basically are buying today, which are fine. Anyways, you understand what I'm getting at. The whole bylaw should be the whole town, not just picking little areas. I think it's against the law. It's wrong. Pick our area, George Street, Hillview, any other streets. They should all change the same. Why should you pick on poor Regency? Thank you.
Thank you. Please, everyone, please. Anyone else for the first time? Sandra, before I start the second time, I'm just going to get some of these questions answered. First, Lawrence, I have a couple of questions here that came up. So are number 2 and 3 in the recommendations interconnected? Maybe we can answer the creation of the ratepayers, how that's legislated. maybe some information on that. And who brought this motion forward? Maybe I can clear up. I know that it was defeated, but there was a motion to go to a consultant. I do forget who brought that forward, but maybe if you have that information, Lawrence. So those 3 questions, if you could answer right now, and then I think there's 2 for Mr. Palmer.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the first question you asked is recommendation 3 and 2 related? Am I correct?
Are they interconnected?
Are they interconnected? Certainly, they're closely related. As Mr. Palmer has indicated, general design guidelines can be provided to the town without studying in details of the 3 neighborhoods, but these guidelines will not have numerical value in them. These are design criteria to articulate architecture elements, whereas recommendation number 3 speaks more to in-depth analyses with numerical values attached to them.
Okay, thank you. And then, so the second was, if you can just kind of maybe let everyone know how the creation of a ratepayers group comes about and the legislation that comes with it as far as the requirements, or maybe Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'd be happy to answer that one. So the town does have a ratepayers and community association, and through that association and policy, there is a number of steps that ratepayers association has to go through to be declared a ratepayers association in the town. As an example, one of them is at least 10 houses with 20 people have to sign up for a ratepayers association. They do need a boundary. They need to have an AGM, or excuse me, an annual general meeting every year. And then they submit all this to my office, and we go over it, make sure everything's all there, and then work with planning to declare it an actual ratepayers association.
Thank you. And then as far as the motion to create or to hire a consultant, can someone answer? And I believe Councillor Gardner is pointing, so I guess I'll answer it. You're the one that brought it forward. So that answers that question. And then I have one more question I just see I had at the bottom. What protections, we heard this, what protections are in place for houses with unique attributes? And I'm assuming, Lawrence, if you can answer, elaborate a little bit further, there are, especially if it's in a heritage neighborhood, whether they are designated heritage or not, those would have protections in place. But if you want to maybe elaborate on what protections are available for unique housing within the town park area.
So staff could certainly look, check up on that in terms of that specific property. But like you mentioned, if it's listed property, the property owner can request the town to go through the designation process through the Heritage Advisory Committee and Council and have that type of protection on that property.
Thank you, Lawrence. And just one more, the last question that came up was basically what's the definition of a stable neighborhood in essence, in general?
I'm not sure if I want to read the whole thing, but it is defined in our official plan in section 8 throughout. So it's not one area, but it does talk about compatibility, but at the same time, it does talk about not exactly the same. So those are the 2 key points that comes from the definition of the stable neighborhood. So, but if you want the full definition, it is in section 8 of the official plan there.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence. And I have 2 questions for Mr. Palmer. Mr. Palmer, did you speak to the ratepayers group?
No, I did not. I did not say I did. What I did do was review all of the submissions of the ratepayers groups and individuals. I did speak to one ratepayer who phoned me. That was Mr. Peter Smith, who is, I'm sure, enjoying Cuba today.
I'm sure he's very much enjoying Cuba, considering the weather. Other question, second question is, why is the map only 3 instead of 5 areas?
I'm going to turn that over to Lawrence because
Sure.
I used what I was given.
Thank you. Lawrence?
So dating back in January 2018, 3 neighborhoods was established through the interim control bylaw. Those are the ones in Aurora Heights, Regency Acres, and Town Park. Through discussion in July 2018, we decided to remove one of the areas out on Tyler Street, as well as put in a Temperance area as part of the site plan control review process. But the interim control bylaw still applies to the 3 specific neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you. So now I'll ask the public if there's anyone else that would like to come up for a second time. If I can ask you to state your name again and your address.
Certainly. Rebecca Beaton. Sir, I would like to know how you have 3 subdivisions listed, and in fact there are 5.
Rebecca, just so we don't go back, I'll just answer that quickly. And I think that council decided, we looked at all the stable neighborhoods, and council decided as a group that those are the 3 that we were gonna specifically have within the study area. And so that's pretty much what happened.
Okay, so Gulf Glen and Cosser has not been represented, is that correct?
From my understanding, no.
Thank you.
Thank you. And sorry I broke away from protocol, everyone. I just thought it was just easier to answer that quickly right there. So if you could state your name again and your address, and
Sandra,
you'll have 5 minutes again.
Sandra Sangster, 46 Holman Crescent. If I can just comment on the previous speaker's question, I think one of the issues that's kind of concerned the Regency Acres group is the fact that there's a little pocket of what we would call Gulf Glen area houses that have been included as part of the Regency Acres stable neighborhood mapping. To the consultant's comments earlier, Regency Acres, the original subdivision, was built in the late 1950s up into the very early 1960s. The Gulf Glen area is a small pocket that for some reason, and we have pointed this out to staff and councillors, somehow got lumped into that area. So if it's the will of council ultimately to move to something like recommendation 3, there really needs to be, I think, separate consideration of that Gulf Glen area as a distinct, different type of house. There's more 2-story houses where Regency is bungalows and 1.5-story back splits primarily. Different size lots and different age of homes. So I think that would be a separate kind of concern if we do go towards more detailed mapping. I think another thing I'd like to comment on relates to, I guess, my worst fear about some of the anxiety that would arise from reading the section of the report that relates to the financial impact of downzoning. And I think, you know, as I said, we are a bit concerned that there really isn't actual quantitative data in the report to really reinforce whether that is the case or not. It's certainly not our sense that in Oakville, Burlington, Ottawa, Ancaster, Newmarket, parts of Toronto and Brampton, that there has been a significant downturn in the real estate market that is tied to zoning bylaw changes for mature neighborhoods. And I will reiterate again the point that within the parameters of the zoning changes that may occur related to these stable neighborhoods, they are, I think, relatively modest. They will still allow very substantial homes to be built that would, I think, still be attractive to developers. I have a house going up across the street from me on Holman Crescent, and I think that that home actually speaks to an aspect of design guidelines, and it's a good example of how a much larger home can be built with an architectural design that moderates massing. It has 3 gables on the front that have basically allow that portion of the home to bear a relationship to the neighboring homes. It is not a flat, massive facade. It has parts that are set back and forward. So I think that provides, and there are some other good examples as well, an example of a home where architectural detail has allowed a home that is going to be 3 times the size of my home to still bear a better connection to the community and the street in which it sits than some of the other examples that I'm sure the consultant has seen in his drive around the community. To the point regarding the speaker who was concerned that he had no idea about the association, I know for the Regency Acres group we had postcards printed. We hand-delivered them to every household in our community to try and increase awareness of our association. We provided email address. We had a booth at the farmers market for 2 consecutive weekends. try and increase awareness. So it's unfortunate that there perhaps were still people in our community that we weren't able to reach, but we have certainly made efforts, as the other associations have done. Thank you.
So if you can state your name again and your address.
130 Heathwood Heights Drive. This is part 2 of what I spoke about earlier. And the timing is actually rather appropriate after hearing some of the other speakers. As an effective organization, we are determined to represent the neighborhood to the best of our abilities in an open and transparent manner. So we only received the report last week. We have not consulted, in all fairness, our members extensively and not conducted a significant outreach program. That being said, we have the following general recommendations. We generally support recommendation number 1 of the consultant's report and recommend proceeding to a public planning meeting with a proposed revision to the planning standard. Listening to everybody today, it's kind of interesting because if you ask 10 different people, and this is why I put this on the overhead, what they consider a compatible development, you'll receive 10 different answers. However, if you ask 100 people, hopefully you can start to develop a trend, and that's what we're trying to do over the next little bit. We'll happily do our due diligence and consult our members in a neutral and honest manner and report back at the public planning meeting. We'll specifically ask, what do you generally believe is the maximum floor area of the housing stock? In all fairness, we've really been focused on percentage of lot coverage in the last little bit, not necessarily gross floor area. We'll present our information compiled for the new developments and simply ask our members, what do you think the maximum height should be? Again, we'll perform outreach and ask our members, especially because the extensive outreach program is not going to take place till recommendations 3, 4, and 5. Do you support further limiting the widths and placement of garage doors? In all fairness, in our area, we actually suspect the answer will be no, but we have to ask first. We generally seek more clarity regarding the research regarding the impact of downzoning, though I will say in all fairness, Mr. Palmer did a good job covering that today. We're specifically also looking for an understanding as to benchmarks as it relates to other municipalities and lessons learned. We're also looking for a realistic expectation regarding the authority of town council and the municipality, especially as it relates to the process and success, or perhaps lack of success, in the appeals process. We generally support recommendations 2 and 3, or we call it 2A, but you have 3, 4, and 5 lumped together. Though we'll again consult our members for what we believe is reasonable design guidelines and hopefully work together with the town to create those. We encourage any of our neighbors in the audience or perhaps listening online to contact us. We really hope to work together to represent the combined and aggregate views of our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. What are you calling it? Councillor Gardner, I will allow this.
Thank you. I'm not going to mention any names, but I want everybody to know that this is a respectful chamber, and it's highly inappropriate for anybody who wants to make a comment at council or anybody in the audience to make obscene hand gestures. So please, don't do it again.
Regarding going through the neighborhood, Regency Acres, and making everyone aware, my house was omitted. I'm sure they knew how I felt. And I know that it was like a flyer card put into a mailbox that people would take out and deposit in their blue box. I would also like to know where the term monster house comes from, because what I term them, large homes I can't afford. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. If you can state your name again and your address, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Allison Halls on Bigwin Drive, again, part of the Aurora Heights Ratepayers Association. I just wanted to point out that a lot of the comments about, restricting some development in some neighborhoods, just to point out, which I think I've said many times, Aurora has a wide variety of types of homes, styles of homes, sizes of homes, decades of homes, etc. These are just 3 neighborhoods that have been long established. If people want to buy, let's say, modern, large homes, there's lots of them available. Bayview's developed, Leslie's developed. There's tons of neighborhoods that have all different styles of homes, which I think is one of the great characters of the town. So by trying to maintain some neighborhoods with some homes that have been around since the 50s, 60s, whatever, I don't see why that's such a big deal when we have so much variety elsewhere. The other thing I just wanted to mention with regards to demographics. I did some quick Googling, so I'll admit it's not a wide-scale view of the demographic trends, but it was written up when the housing boom was going on. And so seniors, of course, still share a large majority of our populations, and that's going to continue now for some time. The maximum family size, or the typical family size, is maximum 1 to 2 children. So that's a decrease probably from past decades. But one thing that was interesting was that 81% of home buyers, they said, in the Toronto GTA area were single adults, 81%. So I'm not sure how many single adults want to buy a 6,000 square foot home. I don't know if they could afford it. Maybe they could. But I think by having the balance with all the variety of the homes that we have in Aurora, including the stable neighborhoods, allowing change, allowing modernization, allowing expansion, all the things that the ratepayers groups have been saying that they're open to within a scale that doesn't inflict suffering on neighbors who are left with those homes beside them. So everybody can enjoy their quality of life and their homes. I don't really see why people are thinking that we're being so restrictive. I think we're just trying to maintain the variety that Aurora already has for all different demographics to live here. Thank you.
Thank you. If you can state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is James Hoyce. I live at 44 Kitimat Crescent in the Aurora Heights neighborhood. Lived there for 22 years. Same house. Haven't changed the footprint at all. It's a raised bungalow, about 1,000 square feet. I've raised 2 children there. They've each had their own rooms. They've each had their own space. And we've done very well there. Just to put it in perspective, I am wholeheartedly in agreement with the direction of zoning amendments. And just doing a bit of math, just so people can get a perspective, I'm about 1,050 square feet, roughly what Mr. Mobbs had talked about, 13% square coverage of the, or square foot or percentage coverage of the lot. If I were to change my house, I could put roughly double that. So I could do 2,000 square feet on a single level floor at 30% of my lot coverage. If I had a basement, now I have 4,000 square feet of living space, which is still in line with what is being proposed. If I choose to put a second floor on there, that puts me up almost to 6,000 square feet, and I'm still within the zoning that is being proposed. So are there restrictions? Yes. Are there restrictions everywhere? I don't see that choking me. I invested in this house because it was my place to live. It's not a good investment. Interest rates will change your investment very quickly. What you need to look at is the home and what it affords you. And at 6,000 square feet with a 2-story, house in this neighborhood, that's a lot of square footage. And that would be way more than I would have ever needed. For some, it may be exactly what they need, but that falls within the 30% lot coverage, which was talked about, and that falls within the heights. So 6,000 is a lot of numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak? Seeing none, before I close the public portion, actually, Ms. Hall, I'm going to ask you, you did mention there was, if you could just come up, there was an error you mentioned, and I think some councillors are just wondering if you could just clarify what the error in the report was, so we could ask.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's probably a typo. Let me just find the page here. It's the page with the chart with the 3 ratepayers groups recommendations for their neighborhoods. Oh yeah, here it is. So physically page 21 on the physical hard copy. So Aurora Heights Ratepayers Association. The second cell under lot coverage maximum, it says maximum of 25% maximum square footage of 2,000. Our proposal actually was a maximum of 20% lot coverage, not 25.
And sorry, again, which page was that?
21 on the physical hard copy, the one with the section 6.2, review of ratepayer association's input.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll pause.
Okay.
Mr. Palmer, did you want to answer that, or Lawrence?
It potentially may be a typo. I will check.
Thank you. So I will, unless anyone else wants to speak, going once, going twice, going 3 times, I will close the public portion of this meeting. Councillors, I will ask at this time if anyone has any questions in regards to the presentation. Remember, just to the presentation, we will deal with well, let's see if we can get through the questions at least first. So I'll start with Councillor Gallo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, of course, to the public for contributing this evening. It's always an education listening to the public. In terms of the presentation, and we speak of downsizing, and we heard many people come to the microphone in terms of loss of value of their properties if we were to go down this route. And there were some experts that weighed in the report. But I did want to know, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Palmer, do you have any empirical evidence, any data, any stats, anything that scientific that, or do you know of any, that the varying neighborhoods across Ontario that have implemented this very thing and that reflect a loss of value to the homes after these types of bylaws were implemented?
Mr. Palmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I did not collect any of that data. I mentioned that in my presentation, that there was no empirical data available, although the folks that I chatted to said that it could be calculated, and they threw out the cost of that calculation, and that was not within my budget. Now, it would require a fair bit of work, but the bottom line is that there isn't any that is readily available. Their philosophy is fundamentally that if you, I'll use downzoning, notwithstanding it may not be a particularly favorable word, if you remove as of right development potential from a given site, you will remove a certain segment of the market that is specifically looking for a redevelopment site. And the reduction in the market means fewer people interested in the property. And that philosophically has an impact on the value and the market of the site. It was the folks at Cushman & Wakefield who told me that they could actually quantify that, although I have never seen it quantified.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Councillor Gallo?
And just as a follow-up on that one, are you aware of any studies? Did any of the other reports to the varying communities, municipalities, that surely they must have either asked or addressed this issue? Are you aware of any of them doing any studies that we could look at and observe?
Mr. Palmer?
Mayor, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Councillor Gallo?
Okay. Just in your opinion, again, Mr. Palmer, the OP is 9 meters and the zoning is 10 meters. So just to restate, our zoning does not comply with our official plan as of today.
Mr. Palmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The official word is conform. There could be an argument made that it conforms based on some general flexibility. However, in the strictest definition of conformity, it should be 9 meters in the bylaw.
Councillor Gallo?
And do we, in your opinion, do we need the design guidelines to implement properly the full site plan approval process or the modified one? Do we need those design guidelines in order to effectively deal with go through the site plan process?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you don't necessarily need it for some of the more typical elements of site plan approval, landscape treatments and massing scale, many of which are already dealt with in the zoning bylaw. However, council adopted guidelines are required if the municipality wishes to take site plan control to the fullest extent of its power, and specifically if you wish to control architectural detail, building materials, and color.
Okay. Councillor Gallo?
And currently in the official plan does allow us to implement a site plan process if council so chooses in the stable neighborhood area. Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Palmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. The first policy or in the legislation under site plan control is you have to have empowering policy in your official plan. My recollection will be that the empowering policy also says to the fullest extent of the legislation or words to that effect. So you're set up to be able to utilize site plan control to its maximum ability if you so choose.
Councillor Gallo?
Thank you. And my last question, would you recommend going through the full study of the 3 areas to determine some of the items that we're going to be deciding tonight, in terms of, specifically for at least me, in terms of a question mark, the maximum footprint or square footage, footprint, I guess, for a property? Would you need to go through that full study in order to justify establishing that number?
Mr. Palmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, interesting question. It really would depend on, in my mind, how restrictive you're intending to be on gross floor area. In my mind, you could look at examples within each of the neighborhoods and establish an average or a range or a number that would apply without going through the rest of the details in terms of the other character-giving elements that you may wish to regulate in recommendations 3, 4, and 5. I think it could be done. We generally know what a typical built form is in those neighborhoods, with the exception of Town Park, which is more complicated. You also know the forms of housing that people are not liking as much. So somewhere in between there is a number that will provide the right balance. So I don't see that as necessarily an outrageously complex exercise, and could be done generically for all 3 neighborhoods or for each individual neighborhood.
Councillor Gallo?
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. And just there is one question that actually wasn't verbally said, but I took note of it, and it is, what would Jane Jacobs do? And that's if those who don't know Jane Jacobs, you can quickly Google who she is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gallo.
I guess that was.
I think we'll all try to answer that question at some point. So thank you, Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a detailed report. Appreciate that. Councillor Gallo, you answered I asked quite a few questions I was going to ask, so thank you very much. In respect to the maximum gross floor area, it's quite a new term for a lot of people to quite understand, because from my knowledge, it's more based for condos, apartments, or commercial or such. And I was hoping that perhaps you could provide a little bit more clarity on how you would actually calculate gross floor area and what that would look like.
Mr. Palmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Gross floor area is typically a defined term in an official plan or a zoning bylaw. It's usually the total amount of floor area above grade that is usable floor space in a house or any building. Obviously, you can establish your own definition of gross floor area, and it's basically the individual floor, the area of the individual floor plates multiplied by the number of stories that exist.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Councillor Gilliland?
Oh, that's good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gilliland. Councillor Humphreys?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for the detailed report. And many of my questions have been answered. I mean, thank you very much, my previous councillors. Just one clarification. You mentioned, the 9 meter to match our official plan, and that just matching, from my perspective, isn't. It's just updating. It's like an administrative thing. I don't think we need to do any of the others right now. We can implement that right away. Just your thoughts on that from a consulting perspective in terms of impact?
Mr. Palmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely true. It's a simple conformity test, in my opinion. But remember, the official plan says it's a maximum of 9 stories. So if you were to do additional work, either generically among the 3 neighborhoods or individually, you can be less than 9. You just can't be more.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that clarity, and it's exactly what I was thinking, so I'm okay with that. Just one more question from a consultant's perspective. And the resident mentioned we have 3 areas that we were studying and stable neighborhoods, and wondering why there was 3 and not 5. Our official plan states 3, I believe. So my question for you, though, is I see these very distinct neighborhoods, very different, and I don't mind, from an official plan perspective, the 9 meter administrative cleanup, 9 meter and below, for all areas. But Town Park is very, very special. And all areas are special, but what I mean by that is some of the things that we talked about down zoning, I don't think particularly apply in the Town Park area. Single driveways, single garages, if any, setback. Just in terms of the style of home, that's just my opinion, looking at all the different areas. I mean, all of them need some zoning work to sort of contain some of the things we're trying to avoid. But just from my perspective, Town Park is very, very unique. And I think some of those things in the report almost give it a positive. Do you understand what I'm trying to get at? Or is that just my take on it?
Mr. Palmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I emphatically agree that Town Park is substantially different than the other 2. The other 2 share some similarities. But Town Park, in my mind, is totally eclectic.
Absolutely.
It has been constantly evolving for 150 years. And it continues to evolve today. Zoning is a planning tool designed to make everything the same, which is an anathema to the Town Park neighborhood. However, the existing zoning bylaw, which has been in place for quite some time, has facilitated a certain evolution in that neighborhood. Changes to that bylaw will adjust the evolution. So there will be an impact. I think one of the speakers talked about Town Park quite eloquently and talked about the desire to maintain existing built form, but allowing the flexibility to expand, evolve, adjust, tweak, whatever. And I think that was exactly right. The goal is, and I hate to say it again, you got to find the right balance in your planning tools. I think recommendation 1 and recommendation 2 is a pretty modest change that will have an impact, but not a huge impact.
Great. No, thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Just clarifies for me. One last question, just very last one. Implement basic site plan review. So we have an interim site plan control bylaw. At the moment, is from your perspective, is this very typical of other towns? Do they use this? I mean, I like it. I think it's great. Just wondering, from your perspective, do you see other towns?
Mr. Palmer?
Or cities using this?
I'm not sure that's exactly right. You have an interim control bylaw.
Yes.
And you have a site plan control bylaw. Those are two quite separate things.
Try to be a planner. Can't do
and the interim control bylaw is kind of a stop, a holdback on Planning Act applications, whereas the site plan, which is enforceable now, is just another process to review development plans against some criteria, whatever those criteria are determined to be.
And do you, through you, Mr. Mayor, and you see this utilized in other towns and cities?
Mr. Palmer?
Okay.
Sorry, Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you.
That is correct.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I ask my questions, I just wanted to clarify. I think there's a lot of people. There are a lot of people in the room with a question regarding market value and the impacts of market value based on upzoning or downzoning or whatever you want to call it. Naturally, I wanted to find out whether there was going to be any impact and whether there was any historical information that we could leverage, and I couldn't find any either. However, the closest thing that I could find was that if you look at, you can just Google all this as well, that if you look at the growth rate of, over the long term, of single detached homes versus semis, townhouses, freehold and condo-style townhouses and high-rises, you'll see that because they're all housing stock, they're all going to go up and down. They're very highly correlated. So if the market's going to go up, then all those housing stocks are going to go up. It's just that they go up in a different rate. You'll see that single detached will go up maybe, depending on how far you go, 20, 30, 40 years, it'll be up maybe 3.75 annualized. You'll see semis at 3.25, freehold townhouses at 2.75.
Kim,
and
I don't mean to interrupt, but can we just deal with questions right now?
And I'll get there. And the freehold and the condos will be at 2, and so the condos is a type of restriction because it has its own bylaws, and so I just want to clarify that it is. That's the closest. I'm just saying that that's the closest thing if you want to try to gauge or picture. That's the closest thing I could find. To the consultant, you mentioned that you didn't recommend sliding scale for the footprint. Would you recommend a sliding scale if we did by gross floor area? Would that make a difference?
Mr. Palmer?
That's a fair question. Again, I don't believe that I've done enough work to determine the benefit of that. I try to make zoning more simple and easily understood than complex. Sliding scales, while they may work in certain circumstances, are more complicated to apply. A lot of the correspondence that I read, the word monster implies scale, and that's gross floor area and height. So if you're managing gross floor area and height in a different way, then I think you're achieving the objectives. You would need to understand the complexities of the neighborhoods much better to determine whether there was any value in the complexity of a sliding scale.
Councillor Kim?
My next question is, I agree with everyone that Town Park is definitely very unique and certainly deserves some unique guidelines attached to it to keep its unique character. Did you find in your walkabout in the town park area that there was a difference in architecture and character from south of Kennedy and north of Kennedy? And if so, if they were separated, would you have considered something different in your recommendations?
Mr. Palmer?
Well, my recommendations are pretty generic, and it's mostly about if you want to do more, study more. Absolutely, there's different pockets within Town Park that are different than other pockets within Town Park. Some are newer, some are older. It's a very complicated neighborhood. At the end of the day, again, the recommendation one is one incremental step towards a better management approach. But really, if you want to get into 3, 4, and 5, you got to get into the neighborhoods. And Town Park may have 5 sub-neighborhoods in it because it's so eclectic. So I wouldn't want to talk about the details. And just so you know, I've been coming to Town Park neighborhood for about 25 years. So I know it pretty well.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Councillor Kim?
Yes, and I just want to clarify, you did have some high-level recommendations for the stable neighborhoods, but just talking about Town Park, you mentioned that, Town Park is eclectic, over decades, if not hundreds of years. You've seen different designs come in, different type of housing stock, and you term eclectic, the way I interpret it, it seemed very positive, that the eclecticness is what makes it unique, and yet you have recommendations to put certain boundaries or guidelines, and so they don't so if you can clarify, when you say eclectic, is that a positive thing? And if it's been doing it and evolving on its own, would you recommend having these zonings?
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Palmer?
Fantastic question. And I'm going to tell you, eclectic is positive. Eclectic is the character of Town Park neighborhood. The more you regulate, the more you're likely to be wrong. So, again, Town Park is different than the other two. It needs a different approach. Maybe no approach at all. The unfortunate thing for me as a planner is that when I travel around the world and go to the greatest cities in the world, they're mostly built before there was planners. So the natural evolution of a community, like Town Park, is very interesting to me. I think it needs broad parameters, and if you want to maintain the eclecticness of it, then you'd leave it at broad parameters.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Councillor Kim?
Thank you. And one last question is, the stable neighborhoods roughly make about maybe a third of Aurora when you look at the area. It seems, as our planner indicated, the definition of stable neighborhoods based on Section 8, it's pretty broad, and so probably in about the 2B areas, the house or the neighborhood in around Bayview, they're about 10 to 20 years old. Some on the west side are about maybe 25. You got a newer housing stock in the 2C off of Leslie. So where I'm going is that in about 10, 20 years, conceivably, they'd be defined as stable neighborhoods. And those residents may want to say, hey, we want to put some guidelines around our neighborhood because we are unique. So have you ever encountered a municipality in North America or anywhere where every neighborhood is a stable neighborhood with unique guidelines, and how has that worked out?
Mr. Palmer?
These are very complicated questions, but I'll give it a try. I'm going to tell you that most people think they live in a stable neighborhood. From my perspective, the phrase for me in official plans in the Greater Golden Horseshoe is to try and differentiate existing development where intensification is minimal, to the other components of your urban structure, the corridors and centers, where major redevelopment is anticipated. So I look at it as they're going to change over time, but the change is going to be moderated much more than in your centers and corridors. That's what stable neighborhoods fundamentally mean to me. There are no neighborhoods that never change. They just don't exist. They have to change, unless they're a museum. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. It's a long-term planning question, but yeah. 20 years from now, my car will probably be an antique collectible. It's not today.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Councillor Kim?
That's good.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Palmer, for being here and all the work you've done up to date. Just a couple questions. I guess first, going back to your slide presentation, just want to understand the legal non-compliance term you used. You certainly spoke at length about marketability and profitability, and so I don't want to go there. But you did mention or allude to other implications, and then I think you referenced rebuilding and things like that. Can you just go in a little bit more detail about what some of the other implications might be of labeling homes as legally non-compliant?
Mr. Palmer?
Mostly because it can be adequately dealt with in a number of ways. But when a person builds a home that conforms to the zoning bylaw, it can be sold as a home that can potentially be expanded, changed, rebuilt if it burns down. Legal non-complying is a stigma that says, maybe not, maybe it's not that easy, because you're not in conformity with the bylaw. So if it burned down, would you be allowed to rebuild it exactly the same? Or would you have to go to the Committee of Adjustment or get a rezoning to recognize what you had before? So there are issues with it. It would be a home that would not be sold with development potential attached to it, given its legal non-compliance. So you're kind of giving it a name that nobody wants. But as I said, I think your legal counsel will be able to quite easily come up with a way to allay that concern through wording in your bylaw and potentially in your official plan.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. And my second question, many years ago, Planning Partnership created our Aurora Promenade study. And within that, there were design guidelines as well. And my interpretation really is those guidelines have not served as being too restrictive for the downtown revitalization. They've offered a lot of flexibility and opportunities for, and variety and opportunities for development. Can I assume that if we proceed with that recommendation to those design guidelines you're talking about for the stable neighborhoods would be in line with what I've seen in that Aurora Promenade study, in that they still do offer that flexibility and opportunities for creativity, innovation, and so forth?
Mr. Palmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I think Lawrence answered this a little bit earlier. It depends on how you use guidelines. Guidelines, the word, fundamentally implies flexibility. What matters is what's in them and how they're implemented through statutory planning tools. Guidelines are outside the Planning Act, but if the guidelines include a lot of numbers and a lot of very specific elements, and that those then inform the zoning bylaw and become a checklist for site plan approval, then they can be considered less flexible. But the guidelines in themselves are inherently flexible, and it depends on how you implement them.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Councillor Thompson?
As a follow-up, not to put you on the spot, but since you're recommending design guidelines, how do you see them being implemented?
Mr. Palmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I see two different levels of a design guideline. The recommendation 2 guideline, I see fairly generic, covering elements that are common among the 3 neighborhoods that would potentially inform zoning, but would mostly be implemented through site plan approval. So I would see them in line with the kinds of guidelines that were done for the promenade.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And we are talking to the presentation. Are we?
To the presentation.
Thank you. Following on Councillor Thompson's, first of all, you're back again. When you're talking about legal non-conforming, we're usually talking about a footprint of a house or setbacks of a house. That's my understanding in any case. Am I correct on that?
Mr. Palmer?
Mayor, I actually corrected the slide and changed it from legal non-conforming to legal non-compliance.
Okay.
It's a very planning semantic issue. Legal non-conforming tends to draw in what the use is, and legal non-conforming, the objective of legal non-conforming is that eventually that use goes away. Legal non-complying is really specific to the regulations of built form. So that's the difference between those two words. And because this is not an issue of legal nonconformity, this is about the regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. So to me, it's a moot point because usually people want to enlarge their homes, and therefore they're not in compliance with what exists there. But in this case, we're talking about very large homes with decreased setbacks. So somebody could rebuild that house with those permissions, or they could build something smaller. So I don't understand why it's an issue in this case, because we're talking about very large homes that have that terminology.
Mr. Palmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's fair enough. You can build something smaller. It's rare, but that can happen. What the issue is that you're typically not allowed to enhance or increase the level of non-compliance. So if you buy a house that was built under current zoning that conforms and complies, and it becomes, because you changed the rules, legal non-complying, if you buy the home, you're not allowed to increase the level of non-compliance, which has an impact on minor variance applications and the interpretation of that. And of course, even if they didn't utilize the entirety of the current as of right zoning, they would not be able to achieve it if they were legal non-compliant.
And that speaks. Thank you. That speaks to my point. We're dealing with very large homes, and the chances of somebody wanting to make the home even larger, especially if we're putting some sort of restriction on the neighborhood, to me it's a non-issue. You speak to the changing the OP, the official plan. It's not an easy thing to do, is it?
Mr. Palmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, well, an official plan amendment is a more onerous process than other processes like rezoning or minor variance or site plan approval. However, your official plan is probably ready to be redone, in which case it could be something that could be considered in your official plan review.
Thank you.
Councillor Gardner?
Yes, we're waiting on the region, as I'm sure you know. Yes. The last comment is Markham did its bylaws they started in 2013. I don't know when they were passed. Brampton passed theirs in 2014. I think I just misspoke. Burlington changed them in 2013. Markham's been working on this since the 1990s, so they have areas where they've changed their bylaws quite a long time ago. So wouldn't we be able to have some sort of information from these three places that speak to property values?
Mr. Palmer?
through you, Mr. Mayor, if they collected it, which they haven't. I happen to be working on the Markham zoning bylaw review, and it's an extravaganza. I think there's 140 individual bylaws with several thousand exceptions. So Markham is not a great example about all things planning. Burlington, however, they've done very interesting work on their stable neighborhoods that goes into 3, 4, and 5 of my recommendations. And certainly they could be a template for consideration by the town of Aurora. You know, it all depends on where you want to go with all of this, but I think Burlington has done a terrific job on this stuff.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. I've heard that, but I'm speaking now to being able to judge whether property values are going to go up or down. I mean, there's history now with Burlington and Brampton.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, there's some, but it only depends on whether they've done the analysis. It doesn't matter about anything else. Like the problem is it's very difficult to judge how the value uplift over time has been affected by the reduction of as-of-right development approval. Property values may have still gone up incrementally, but the uplift based on development potential may have modulated that downward. You know, the only example that I know of, and this is a Toronto example, and it's Leaside, which was talked about, is that developers go into Leaside and they offer homeowners about 30% over the asking price, simply because they want to tear down the single level bungalow and replace it with a 2.5-story house. They will not pay the 30% extra if the development as of right does not exist. They don't speculate on that. Now, do people keep track of that? No, they don't. However, when you talk to the Leaside residents about potentially using restrictive covenants, they will not do it because they understand that if they and their immediate neighbors do it, no one else is going to do it, and they don't want to give up the uplift.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Councillor Gardner?
A couple of comments. I think probably academic experts could come up with the answers to my questions. And the second thing is, well, but we want to protect our areas. Our official plan is very specific about that. And we do want to find, we want to, we want to find that happy medium, hopefully. But our official plan is very specific about protecting. So I don't know what Leaside says about its area, but I don't know if that's an appropriate example or not.
That's a comment, correct?
That's a comment.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gallo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the experts, is it fair to say that the legal experts, spoke about basically the law and facts? The heritage discussion, experts in heritage, urban design, experts in urban design wouldn't profit either way in terms of what they put in the report. Is it fair to say that the real estate market experts have somewhat of a bias that based on what they would express in the, and I would preempt that's a somewhat unfair question, but let's see where it goes. That they have a bias in terms of, based on what they would say in the report, could affect them financially.
Mr. Palmer?
How would that work? These are not real estate agents. These are experts in financial impact and market real estate. They don't sell real estate.
So they have no bias in terms of establishing or commenting that a restriction in bylaws would affect the real estate market?
Mr. Palmer?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, they made those statements, but I don't see how they would profit from that.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Councillor Gallo?
Another maybe unfair question, but would you consider a 9-meter maximum halfway through the roof, 3,000 square foot maximum floor area, single driveway, of a basic site plan process in place and a neighborhood specific guideline, an area that would or could become eclectic?
Mr. Palmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it totally depends on what is included and what the numbers are.
So through you, it could be possible.
Could be possible, but you'd have to be very careful to not stifle, particularly in Town Park. Again, we've heard Town Park is eclectic. People have added on, people out the back, up top, finished basements, separate garages. They even have some homes with garages that stick out front. You want to make sure that that new development is within an appropriate parameter without being so restrictive that they can't do anything.
Councillor Gallo?
That was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland?
Thank you. Just a quick question. You had said you were in favor of the driveway width and said it was appropriate, and I just kind of want to get clarity if you meant that as a blanket statement for all stable neighborhoods presented, or was that specific to Town Park area?
Mr. Palmer?
The impact of cars on a streetscape is extremely aggressive. It really impacts how you view a street as you walk or drive down it. Obviously, a 4-car garage in these neighborhoods has a huge impact because there isn't any. So if you put one in, it would be aggressive. You would notice it. I think that limiting the driveway width is a good way to keep cars out of the front yard, to manage the scale and width of the garage door itself and the impact of the garage door on the streetscape. And I think it's a positive element of what I see today when I drive around those neighborhoods.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Would you recommend with that in mind that we consider a setback with the garage from the main facade?
Mr. Palmer?
It's one of my favorite topics, Mr. Mayor, through you. I think that garage doors should always be set back from the main front wall of a house. And that comes from years, 70s and 80s, as lots got narrower and narrower, the garages got squeezed out to the front of the house where there's no face, no house space on the street anymore. It's just a garage door, 2 cars, and a front door way at the back. That is not an attractive built form in these neighborhoods. I'm totally biased about that. But
there's your bias, Councillor Gallo.
But you drive around and look at a neighborhood that has all the garage doors out front, and the feeling is not pedestrian friendly. It's not. It's very utilitarian, and it's not what these neighborhoods are at all. So, yes, I agree with that.
Perfect. Through you, Mr. Mayor. In addition to that, would it be fair to suggest that the main facade be a greater percentage than the garage?
Mr. Palmer?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think it'd be contradicting myself if I didn't say yes. I don't know what the right number is in these neighborhoods, but you don't want the primary visual impact of the building to be the garage.
Yep, perfect.
Councilor
Thank you.
Gilliland?
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gilliland. Any other questions? Seeing none, so I'll just, Mr. Palmer, thank you very much for coming out. I think you did a wonderful job answering, I think, Councilor's questions here tonight. I just had one. Does your report, in essence, the recommendation that is coming out of this report is for staff to develop zoning bylaw amendments that speak to recommendations 1 and 2 and possibly any of the other recommendations that council would like for staff to look at in creating those zoning bylaw amendments?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, I think that's fair. I think recommendation 1 is a modest step that will have an impact. Number 2 will help with the basic site plan review process. And if you want to dig deeper, then that's up to you, and it could be an incremental step. I don't believe that doing 1 and 2 preclude you from doing the rest at some other time.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for coming out. Council, before we get into and put something on the floor, I'm going to ask that we take our 10-minute health break at this point. Okay? Thank you very much, everyone. Councillors, Councillor Gardner, Councillor Gilliland, we're going to start. Okay, thank you, councillors. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move a motion for staff to come back with a zoning bylaw amendment that addresses recommendation 1 and 2 of the consultant report.
Could you repeat that, Councillor?
Yeah, I'd like to move a motion for staff to come back with a zoning bylaw amendment that addresses recommendation 1 and 2 of the consultant report.
Come back to when?
Sorry?
When would you like it to come back? To another public planning meeting?
To the next public planning meeting. That's the only option.
To a public planning meeting, I believe. Okay. Anyone want to second that? Lawrence, do you need a timeline on that, or are we looking at February or March?
So you, Mr. Chair, I believe the March public planning meeting will be more suitable to meet the statutory timeline for notifications under the Planning Act than February. So,
Councillor Kim, are you okay with attaching the timeline of the March public planning meeting?
That's fine.
That's fine. Anyone want to second that motion? Can we put it up? Linda, can we put it up? It'll take a second, Council.
Can we do that change to 9 meters to make it, but like not in March? Like, what can we do?
But we're not putting in numbers right now. We're looking at options.
We're not going to change it to agree with the. Don't we have to change it to agree with the official plan?
Well, that's the option that is.
Okay, Council, if it's up on the screen. Does anyone want to second that? Council? Councilor Gardner? Does anyone want to second the motion? You'll second it? Oh, sorry, I didn't look over there. Sorry, Councilor Gallo. Okay, so we have a second. Councilor Gallo seconds it. All right, any comments or questions? Councilor Gardner.
Thank you. I'm looking at the first recommendation from the Planning Partnership. So can we change the 9 meters that's in the official plan? Can we just change the zoning bylaw to that right away instead of waiting till March? The second part is going to take quite a while to get in place. Through
Mr. Cook?
Through you to Mr. Cook.
Sorry, can you please clarify the question?
I think the question was, can we change the 9 meter height immediately, or do we need to go through a zoning bylaw amendment to change that 9 meter height?
It could come back in February with the 20 days notice?
Well, yeah, with the proper notice, much like any other changes that we might be suggesting here, it needs to go through the public process, which will require notice. And the February 27th public meeting will require notice to be sent out by February 7th, the latest in the newspaper. Yep, 20 days. So
it's too hard.
If that's all council wants to change for height, that certainly is possible to do that for 27th. But some of the reporting deadlines, of course, in our in-house processes would also have to change. So,
Councilor Gardner.
I'm not sure what that means. So if we wanted just to do the change 9 meters in the OP to 9 meters in the zoning bylaw, we give the 20 days notice. It's not possible no. Is the planning department, can the planning department do it, or is that too difficult? Through you, Mr. Seo.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I mean, it is technically possible from a deadline perspective. We would basically have to just sort of forego our system of vetting these reports and getting them on the agenda and circulating them, and I mean, we would just have to rush it through and do it as a separate one out.
Councilor Carter?
We've been waiting since 2012 to do this. I think maybe it's in order.
Thank you, Councilor Gardner. Any other comments, questions? Councilor Humphreys.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, just to get some clarification, I know that we want to move forward with 1 and 2, but there's an additional information being maximum floor area, 9 meter height, placement of garage doors, council approved. I don't know if I want it to be that specific. Are we talking floor? Is that 100% where we're going, like maximum floor area? Are we doing? Sorry, just to clarify.
Yeah, Councillor, those are the recommendations from recommendations 1 and 2. That's what they actually speak to, and so those are just kind of reiterating what 1 and 2 are.
Okay.
So when this comes back to us, that's when staff will have a report that actually has a lot of the numbers and figures in there that we can actually start to go in, now starting to decide. And I'll use Councillor Tom's, one of his former Councillor Tom's favorite terms was that's when we'll start deciding whether it's going to be Cheetos or Doritos in the vending machine. So that's when we'll get to that in-depth analysis as far as the numbers.
Perfect.
Right now, I think we're keeping it at a high level, and we're asking staff to develop a zoning bylaw amendment that meets these criteria. So to move from a lot coverage to a GFA, The 9-meter height, I think it speaks to that in the thing, and I think we're all in agreement that we need to bring it to conform to the OP, and then it just speaks to staff looking at bringing forward those recommendations as far as placement of garage doors and a council-approved design guidelines.
So that, thank you, I appreciate that clarification, Mr. Mayor. And there's that one area where you just mentioned maximum floor area versus lot coverage. I just don't. Can we put in there? And maybe I'm going against the motion. I don't know if that is maximum floor area or lot coverage the best. I mean, I know the consultant's report said that, but are we confident that that's the way we want to go? I feel bad asking the question now, but through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe I can ask our planning manager.
Can you once again clarify that question again? What's the question about?
Well, the question is, we're asking you to come back with a report as per the consultant, being maximum floor area. So that's sort of where we're going. Right now, our bylaw is percentage lot coverage. It's a big, I don't know, I'm not a planner. It's a good change, but I just want your perspective. Is that something, I like staff's perspective on it.
Sure.
Is lot coverage, maximum floor area.
So Mr. Cook, is going from a lot coverage to a maximum floor area, is that an effective tool, or would it be better to stay with lot coverage? I think that's what the councillors I think that's what the councillor's looking for.
Yes, in my professional opinion, I believe that GFA is a good tool to regulate massing and scale of any development.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I just want to be clear on what's coming back to us. So I guess I can compare it to our tree bylaw. So
really,
will this? Yeah, I'm going to go there. Will this be a report coming back to us which outlines these recommendations, and if approved at the next meeting would actually be the zoning bylaw amendment on the council agenda? So there's still an opportunity when this next report comes before us to further debate these points of placement of garage doors, council approved design guidelines. We're just now taking that next step where staff are then putting forth the recommendations, and there may still be an opportunity, to Councillor Humphrey's point, to debate whether or not we want to move to the GFA or some other version of lot coverage. Am I understand this correctly? So just like in the tree bylaw, we got a report, had lots of different things. Council ran through a number of different amendments, motions, and changes before finally agreeing on something.
Councillor Thompson, correct.
Perfect.
Councillor Gilliland.
My question's kind of similar in the sense that if we're specifically stating 9-meter height, placement of garage doors, and design, and if we come back and we say, well, we want to address setbacks and maybe it's less, or we want to address the driveway widths and it's less, then we have to go back to square one and do another public planning meeting because we're down zoning once again based on just a driveway width. So I feel like you're very specific on only these things that you're going to come back with versus the driveway width, and we never really discussed setbacks, and what if we decided, oh, in Town Park area we want 8.5. I'm not so sure where we're at, so I just feel like you're being very specific on what you're coming back with, and is in our best interest to be a little bit more vague on directing you to come back with your recommendations that might give us a little more time in speeding it up.
Mr. Cook?
Certainly. At the next public planning meeting, the planner here will have to specifically spell out what the changes are going to be in the zoning bylaw. For example, if we lower the height from 10 to 9 at the public planning meeting and council decides to go even lower to 8.5 or 8 meters, that will trigger, because it's more restrictive, it will require a new public meeting and notice to the public.
Okay, so sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. So aside from, okay, let's not talk about the 9-meter height, but at the same time, currently we don't have restrictions on driveways, but it's not mandated in this motion. We don't have any restrictions or any comments about, reviewing side by setbacks. Is that also going to be a result of you coming back and saying, say you didn't have anything in your recommendation for the driveway at 3.5 and we decide at that point, well, we would like to see the 3.5 meter, does that mean that we have to go yet again to another public meeting?
Mr. Cook?
Yes, if staff is looking for direction from council, even to address certain provisions in the bylaw, if it's not specific numerically, at least the general topic of provisions, height, setbacks, on the side yards, etc. That way that staff has a clear direction of what is expected at the next public planning meeting, and we can have a discussion on those topics.
Councillor Gilliland?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, then would it be in our best interest to specify the topics in which we really want you to address now in this motion, like the driveway width and setbacks included in this motion today, so we can save time?
Mr. Cook?
Yes, I believe that's a good approach.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would like to make an amendment to this motion, if I could.
Go ahead.
And to include setbacks and the driveway widths. Or any other topics? Do you have any topics actually to recommend? Through you, Mr. Mayor, to planner.
Can you state the amendment again?
I want to include the maximum driveway width that we were talking about that was recommended and it was appropriate by Mr. Palmer, and perhaps address the setbacks, side yards.
Are we discussing this? I need a seconder for that amendment. Seconded by Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gilliland, would you like to speak to the amendment first?
Specifically, the reason why I'm including this amendment is just I feel like if we're going to direct staff to come back with any recommendations, we've already laid out the topics in which we want to have addressed, and that way when they do come back with recommendations, we can either agree or disagree, so we can eliminate the opportunity of going back to council to a public planning meeting once again, so we can speed this up, if that makes any sense.
Councillor Humphreys?
Thank you to you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate where Councillor Gilliland is going here, but I'm just worried that we're getting too specific now, and we're going into recommendations 3, 4, and 5, because I do believe garage widths and that type of detail needs to be almost, we talked a little bit about the unique areas, right? So not all, that one size fits all is not going to work. We're going to have to go back and look at driveway widths, for Town Park versus, Regency versus Aurora Heights area. If I'm not, maybe I'm misunderstanding.
I just feel like he's going to come back with whatever he decides.
So I want to know how deep, the 9 meter, and then placement of garage doors. And we're going to talk about gross GFA versus percentage lot, which I think was enough for us to look at. And now if we're going to get into a bit more detail, I'm just worried, are we going to section 3, 4, and 5? It is a fine line, I think. I understand that, we'll get them quicker, but anyways, I'll let others talk to it.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, and I agree with Councillor Humphrey's logic. I think there are important issues to deal with, but I see them being dealt with through the design guidelines or looking at the individual areas. I don't necessarily think driveway width is the same for all 3 regions or 3 neighborhoods, and so, as Councillor Humphrey alluded to, this may not be a case where one size fits all, and so I think we'll get there when we'll deal with it, but it won't be in this first stage.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gallo.
My question might be outside of the scope of the amendment.
I'll see if I allow it.
Well, it's basically, I think regardless, if we send this back, even with all of this included, to a public planning meeting, we're going to make changes, which is going to trigger another public planning meeting. Even if we say 9 meters, but we say to the peak we haven't established that now. To the midpoint, no flat roofs. Those are all changes that will become more restrictive, which would trigger, I assume, another public planning meeting. So we're going to be going through this process anyway. So even if this stuff comes up at the next public planning meeting, I think it's still okay. And I'd rather confirm with, these are my perspective. I'd like to confirm with staff.
Mr. Cook?
That is correct. If there's changes, but if maybe I'm just looking at it positively, that the recommendation at the next public planning meeting may be something that the council will all be accepting of, then it does not require another public planning meeting.
So we're hoping that you write the perfect report,
That's
the perfect
exactly
zoning bylaw amendments, and everyone agrees here at the table.
That's right.
And it's unanimous, so let's hope for the best. Councillor Gallo.
No, that was it. I think we're going to head to another one anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Gallo. Councillor Gardner, to the amendment.
I'm also a little confused. So recommendation number 1 is that town should proceed with the approval of a new zoning bylaw regime. And the second one is to better articulate the requirements for the basic site plan process, the town could proceed with the preparation of design guidelines that fully articulate the town's expectations, which would include, which I think we should name it, which should include building height, setbacks, driveway width, gross floor area. And if I can remember what Mr. Palmer said, although he can say it so much better, the reason we would do gross floor area is because there's so many different sizes of lots. So if we do a % coverage, we might have some lots with huge homes and some lots with little homes. Whereas if we do gross floor area, it'll be in relationship to the size of the lot, which I think is probably a better way to do it. Because then it's not a one size fits all. It's a one size. It's each size fits the lot you're on. But the recommendations are pretty specific from Mr. Palmer. I think they're good, 1 and 2, and I don't think we should perhaps dictate a height. If we're going to study the areas and their characteristics to some degree, not in depth, and Mr. Palmer has already said so much about each area in his report.
Councillor, I don't mean to interrupt, but to the amendment, just for adding driveway width and setbacks.
Did go on a bit. Well, if that's an important, if that's something important for the town park area, then we should do it. Maybe we should say, I don't know if we can do it just for the town park area. That's all we've ever talked about is driveway widths and setbacks for the town park area. So maybe we can make it specific to the town park area. It doesn't really relate to any of the other areas, and that's caused some confusion. So could we change the amendment to do that? As the mover, you could consider that.
Would you like to make that a friendly amendment, specifically the town park area? Are you okay with that? That's fine. Seconder, Councillor Thompson, you okay with that friendly amendment? Sure. Okay. To include driveway width and setbacks in the town park. Councillor Gilliland, did you want to speak again, or did you have that because you were asked? Okay. Anyone else want to speak to the amendment? Councillor Thompson, second time.
I just feel that now we are moving into 3, 4, or 5, and going back to the consultant's report, he said the more specific you get, then the more consultation is necessary. And so again, I just think that we'll get there, but let's do 1 and 2 first, and then start doing each of the neighborhoods. Because if we start throwing out amendments for each specific area, then really we're trying to rush through the process.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Okay, I'm going to call the vote on the amendment using your tabulators. Just on the amendment. Councillor Gardner. The amendment fails. Back to the original motion. And next up I have, actually, well, Councillor Gilliland, you're still up. If you still like to continue speaking on the original motion.
I was going to speak on the previous motion, but that's okay. I'll come back.
Okay.
I'll come back. Come back to me.
Okay.
Like not the original, sorry, the one that I had made, sorry.
Councillor Gallo.
Could we have it on the screen, the motion, please?
It's coming back on the screen
now. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to I'm not sure, someone over there, whoever can answer it. If we move forward with this, Mr. Palmer spoke to the design guidelines, as well as, maybe even more importantly, the maximum floor area, and how do we go about determining what is the appropriate floor area. I asked whether, we have to go through an extensive process, and I think it was a little more yes than no. If you really want to do it right. And I hazard to guess we're not going to be going through that process before this comes to the next public planning meeting. So how is staff going to determine or give us appropriate numbers to determine their recommendation on maximum floor area without going through that process? I don't know, unless it's going to be just 2,800, 2,900, 3,000, and pick one. So maybe
Mr. Cook, if you can maybe answer that as far as what type of process will you use to analyze what the proper figure will be as far as the maximum floor area?
I believe Mr. Palmer implicated this in his one of his answers. He did indicate we can use averages. Now, staff do have the impact data to find out what the median lot sizes are in each of these stable neighborhood areas. So we can start with that point to figure out what the appropriate GFA would be by using averages. But if you want to go further details, then yes, further studies will be required.
Councillor Gallo?
I just, my overarching feeling is that I really don't want to rush this, and I realize we want to get it done fast, and it's been a long time and all of that, but we'd be doing a disservice if we really rush this just to get it done. I don't think that's fair to anyone, and I'm just not sure we have enough information sitting here today to be able to answer all of those questions even for March, without further investigation, further consultation with the residents. And I know that may not be a popular opinion on this side or over there, because everybody wants it done, but I just want it done properly. I have the luxury of saying that I'm new and I didn't go through this, but I that's my gut feeling.
Thank you, Councillor Gallo. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And no, I understand what Councillor Gallo is saying, because we want to do this right. The residents have waited for so long, so let's make sure we do it right, and it's going to have the appropriate impact for everyone. And I think Mr. Mayor is probably going to just shake his head at me again, but I know we talked about GFA, and we are percentage lot coverage, and we're going to, and there's going to be a planning, I know a very good planning methodology behind how we go about using GFA in the future. So I'm going to say two things. One, and don't hesitate to say no, staff, but can we see both percentage and GFA? Or if that's just absolutely wrong, we won't do that.
Mr. Cook?
Lot coverage will dictate the building footprint, and the GFA will regulate the massing and scale. So the two does not conflict with each other, but they should complement each other.
Oh, okay.
Councillor Humphreys, does that answer your question?
Okay, perfect. That's fine then. I trust our planners. The other thing is, just for clarification, recommendation 1 was basically to help our bylaw, zoning bylaw, catch up with the OP. And it's basically the 9-meter height, right?
Correct. That's part of recommendation.
That's part of recommendation.
There's 3 bullet points.
Can that be done, and we talked about it, could that be done quicker than the rest of this, or should we just leave it alone?
Councillor
Done
Gardner already asked that.
Okay, good. Leave it alone. I'm fine then. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
No problem. Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. I'm going to go to Councillor Kim. He's speaking for the first time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Cook. Between now and March, will you have access to Mr. Palmer and the planning partnership as you figure out the various figures and the guidelines?
Mr. Cook?
No, to my understanding, Mr. Palmer was retained to do the peer review of the study neighborhood study. Anything else on top of that will need further discussions.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kim? You're good? Thank you. Councillor Gardner, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at page 23 of the report, 32 of our agenda. So the first recommendation is that the town should proceed with the approval of a new zoning bylaw regime with the following considerations. The first one is using maximum floor area. The second one is maximum height should be 9 meters as per the official plan, and lower height limits could be considered for each stable neighborhood. And the third part of recommendation 1 is about the garage doors and the width of the driveways. So that's recommendation 1, and that's what it says on our, so I think we're okay with that. Recommendation 2 is to better articulate the requirements of basic site plan review process. The town could proceed with the preparation of council approved design guidelines. Not exactly sure if council has to do more before we approve that. Design guidelines that fully articulate the town's expectations with respect to site and building design within the stable neighborhoods. I'm not sure we want to go into color and building materials and architectural details, but we could go into building heights, setbacks, and maybe some design elements. I really don't know how to go with this, and I don't think we can speak to Mr. Palmer at this point with what he had in mind, can we? Mr. Mayor, maybe we could have a waiver of the procedural bylaw. We've just spent a lot of money to get Mr. Palmer's expertise. It's not entirely clear what we should be doing here.
Councillor Gardner, I'll allow it this time if you have a specific question for Mr. Palmer.
I just wanted to ask Mr. Palmer if in recommendation number 2, we're also talking about the building heights and setbacks, and maybe some basic design guidelines for the different areas. Mr.
Palmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. like many policy writers, it's written with a certain level of interpretation expected. And really what I'm talking about here in these guidelines, and again, these would not be particularly neighborhood specific, but more overarching. It does talk about site and building design. And site and building design together talk about the location of a building on a lot and its massing.
It's mass? And it's mass, you said?
Yeah, and it's massing. So I think that...
that includes height and...
I think that there will be general discussion about setbacks, height, and all of those elements that create the streetscape through the design guidelines. Obviously, I haven't put together a table of contents, but certainly those things would be considered.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Councilor Gardner?
So that's what we've... So I think that's what Council's been talking about. I think that's what the public's kind of been talking about. So if we go with recommendation 1 and 2, I think it covers it, except, I mean, do you want to, if you want to do it right, do you want to do the 3 neighborhoods separately? Or do you want to leave that? It almost doesn't seem to me to make sense to do a 3 neighborhood approach, like an overall approach, when we've already said we want to do the 3 neighborhoods separately. So I think, or maybe we can do it that way and then go to number 3 if we want, if we don't like what comes up, and refine it. But then the question is, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. CEO, how are we going to, this is a lot of work. How are we going to go about doing this?
Mr. CEO?
Sorry to put you on the spot, but I mean, we just can't throw it back to staff, and
it is a lot of work, but I think that staff are going to do their best to bring us something that meets the requirements that we're asking for, that will allow us to have better protections for the stable neighborhoods. You know, I think they've heard the conversations around the table, they've heard from the public, and I think they have an understanding of where they need to go. And so I'm actually pretty confident that staff will come back with something that I think that the majority of us will probably look at and agree with once it comes back to us.
Thank you. I just know that staff is busy.
They are.
So we're asking for this for the end of March. Okay. Well, I suppose we can always discuss it at the council table if we need to make another.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Looking at the recommendation in the motion, I kind of stand corrected because it does state in here the town could consider limitations to the number, width, and/or placement of garage doors. So I'm assuming whatever is within that recommendation, that's what you're going to do, which is great. I do want to simplify this process, and I do like the recommendation 1 and 2, and I do want to go forward with that. And just kind of going back on what I was saying, I was under the impression if you ask for more of a down zoning and to go back up because we disagree, then we don't have to go to public planning. That was kind of where I was going with that method, but I'm happy just going forward with what we've got here. But my question to Mr. Cook is, say we approve the 9 meters and some other recommendations coming forward, does that mean that we automatically would then start the process of lifting the interim bylaw before we decide to maybe implement more guidelines, or is that something that we decide as council?
Mr. Cook?
If council approves a bylaw, are you asking how does that affect the interim control bylaw?
Yes.
Councillor.
Through Mr. Mayor, then the process will be, when we enact the actual zoning bylaw, there will be a clause in that zoning bylaw to lift the interim control bylaw the same night. So the bylaw itself that we're passing that stipulate the setbacks and heights, there's a previous, in the parent of that bylaw, there will be a clause to lift that interim control bylaw off and in place put the new zoning bylaw in.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So if we decided you came back and we were happy with the maximum floor area, everything that you've kind of mentioned here, but yet we never really addressed, just for an example, in Town Park area, setbacks, a garage or a driveway width, we could potentially have the interim control bylaw lifted Therefore, anybody could build within those parameters, and we'd still have to have yet another discussion to maybe make an adjustment to that. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it won't get to that point. All the discussion you're mentioning will happen at the public planning stage. When you enact the bylaw, that is 2 meetings after the public planning. So at the public planning meeting stage, council as well as the public will discuss the merits of the proposal to add more restriction or to lift the restriction. After there's consensus made, the actual bylaw gets considered at the general committee meeting and ultimately enacted at the council level. So only when it's enacted by council, that's when it's fully enforced and the interim control bylaw is lifted. But before then, the interim control bylaw remains and no one can build outside of the existing zoning regulations.
Okay, that was my question. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Callahan. Before I go to you, Councillor Callahan, I just need a motion to extend. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Gardner. All those in favor? Hands up. Opposed? That carries. Councillor Gallo.
Thank you. Just a procedural question first. While we're suggesting to go to a public planning meeting, and let's say we do that and we have a consensus and it goes to a GC, that does not prohibit us from making any changes at the general committee level. We could, but does it trigger additional
public planning,
public notice, and we still have to, it's not as quick as we make changes at GC and then we ratify at council. There's still delay, but we don't have to go to a public planning meeting in order to make changes. Correct?
Mr. Cook? So if I understand you, Councillor Gallo, what you're asking is that if we pass what comes before us at public planning, at the next public planning, and we say let's move it to GC, and then at GC council decides to make some changes, tweak it, would that trigger it to go back in essence to a public planning, or would we be able to make those changes and then continue to move forward?
Yeah.
Is that Mr. Cook?
If those changes are made in GC and they're more restrictive, then yes, it will trigger another public planning meeting because we need to notify the public what those changes are. If the changes are to relax the provisions, allowing more flexibility, then those changes can consider as something that does not require further public notification because you're allowing for more relaxation.
Councillor Gallo?
Okay, I seem to remember many bylaw changes for planning applications. Anyways, that's fine. Is there value, and again, I wasn't necessarily here or in tune with what happened within the last year and a half, I guess, that this has been discussed, or 2 years. Is council confident that we've done enough public consultation, that we have enough information to be able to make these decisions? And if not, there's always option number 6, which is basically doing that. I suspect through a consultant, and I would look to maybe the CAO in terms of if it requires more money, how we go about doing that. If we were to decide to move into option number 6 and go out into the public again and get a better sense of the answers to some of these questions, how would we go about doing that?
Mr. CAO?
So, Mr. Mayor, I'd want to consult with Lawrence and set out a plan. But basically, I mean, we would do public consultation. We could probably do at the staff level, like we would an open house and other types of events like that. So I think we could handle a lot of it internally if it's just a public consultation piece.
Councillor Gallo?
Yeah, so it's I'll just read it out. It's should the town wish to consider additional changes to the existing planning regime beyond recommendations 1 and 2, a substantive public outreach program should be undertaken to ensure that all affected landowners have a chance to understand and respond to the proposed changes to their current as-of-right development permissions. Public consultation is a fundamental component of any planning activity, particularly when municipal action may have widespread impacts. I don't know if another public, open house is going to achieve that. My gut tells me that something more significant, and whether if it's internal or external, engaging consultant, I don't know. But my preference is to move into that prior to, because I don't know how we're going to answer some of these questions without that. And I'd hate to be in a loop again that we have a report in March before us, and we have a council full of residents that either say I wasn't engaged or I completely disagree with what you're doing. And that's kind of my fear that may happen if we don't. This is my, and again, I'm happy to hear others if you feel confident that we've accomplished that and that we're at the point of decision making. Then
And Councillor Gallo, I appreciate the fact that you weren't around last term. We've done, I think, some pretty extensive public consultation. We've had up to, I think it's maybe 6 or 7 meetings. This is our 8th meeting. Public's been coming out continuously, time and time again. They've been speaking to us. They've been speaking to staff. Through the report with the planning partnership. So I think we've done that extensive consultation. I think it is time that we make some decisions here. And so, as I mentioned, I think that staff have heard loud and clear from not just from council but from residents, and I believe that they're going to come back with something that aligns to what everyone is asking for. And as a consultant mentioned, Mr. Palmer, we need to find that right balance, and I think that staff understand that, and I'm confident that right balance will come in, and we'll be able to better protect our stable neighborhoods by making a decision. I got Councillor Thompson.
I actually think we can do both. I think we can move forward with the motion in front of us, but I do think that at this point it is worthwhile to have that substantive public outreach program, because some of the concepts being contemplated within recommendation 2, to me, are relatively probably new to some residents, especially when we're talking about changing from lot coverage to gross floor area. That's not necessarily something that we have talked about repeatedly in previous meetings. So personally, and we're in budget anyways, I think that it is worthwhile for us to have some conversations about this substantive public outreach program to say, at least minimally, hey, look, these are the recommendations that we are talking about today, moving forward for the March public planning meeting, and even about the council approved design guidelines. While it's general in this recommendation, as Councillor Gardner alluded to in the report, there are 2 sections to it. One is a generic one, but it says furthermore, you can also start going into building materials and colors and so forth. And I don't know what staff's direction is at this point in time, but I think that's a huge one that residents within the area will have a wide variety of opinions. And so I think that we can still move forward with this, and staff can still work on the report for the March public planning meeting. But let's get out in front of this one, and let's have that substantive public outreach. Let's have these conversations. If it takes some funds and we're in budget, we can have that conversation as well. But there are some big concepts being talked about here that probably have not been brought forward to any great detail previously. We've talked about, yes, we need to make changes. Now we're starting to say, here are some of the changes. And so, I think we should put an amendment on the floor with regards to that public outreach program, but I don't know if any of my colleagues want to have something else to say about it. But I think we can do both. We can move forward with the report, but let's start getting out there and telling everybody what's happening.
So what would your amendment be, Councillor Thompson?
If nobody else wants to speak to it, I'll put the amendment on the floor. But it would be that a substantive public outreach program be undertaken to ensure that all affected landowners have a chance to understand and respond to the proposed changes, period, which is part of recommendation 6.
Seconder? Councillor Humphreys? Speaking to the amendment. Councillor Gardner?
I think Councillor Thompson is right, because this, in particular, the gross floor area, it's a whole new thing. I'm sorry.
When you
I'm
said it, we said no.
My apology on the record to Councillor Gallo.
Okay. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make it really quick. That's what I tried to get earlier. So I'm happy that we're doing this. Just gives that public awareness. Everyone understands what's happening, and we're good. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Gallo.
Just a question to staff, if that is enough direction to accomplish what you've heard we want to accomplish through Mr. Cook.
Mr. Cook?
Just for clarification, you want to do the extensive public consultation before the March public planning meeting, is that correct? Communication?
I think public outreach. So, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that we would be sending out notification in regards to some of the changes that we're looking at implementing. Would that be correct, Mr. Cook?
We will be sending notifications like we did for tonight and the other public meetings, yes.
That would speak to the changes that we're looking at implementing?
That's correct, yes. Yeah.
And so would that speak, Councillor Thompson, would that speak to your outreach?
I like the word substantive. You know, let's go beyond just what the Planning Act requirement is. We have a communication department, we have social media, we have all kinds of different avenues. Let's make sure that we, utilize all of them to get the word out about what's happening. To me, that's substantive.
That's fine.
And, as I said, we're in budget. If there needs to be a conversation about other things that we need to utilize, or if the CEO wants to bring forward the fact that there may be some costs associated with it, fine, let's talk about it. But, let's move forward on it now.
So, Councillor, I'll ask.
And just with regards to the amendment, I just ended it off at changes. I don't know if you need to add to the current as of right development permissions.
What did you want to remove?
For me, I just moved it and ended the amendment at proposed changes. I don't know if it's necessary to their current as of right development permissions.
Can we change that so it ends at proposed changes? Yeah. So, Councillor Thompson, I'm just going to ask Mr. CEO, can we ask the communications department to be part of that substantive public outreach?
Through Mr. Mayor, certainly we would involve communications. I'd really want some clarity about what substantive means, because with this timeline and coming back in March, I don't want to come back here and be told that what we did was not substantive enough. The budget doesn't really help us. The budget's passed at the end of March. You want us back here before March with the changes. So I'm not quite sure what substantive means. If on one hand we think there could be more financial resources needed, on the other hand we got to get it done and be back here at March planning. So I need some clarity on that.
Councillor Thompson, I'll go back to you.
So we have multiple channels in which to reach the residents. My expectation is we try to utilize all of them. Yes, public planning typically sends out notices to all the landowners in the area, and sometimes we expand the circle, and so we have registered mail. But we have a communication department, we have newspaper ads, we have a variety of different vehicles, and my hope is that we try and utilize them all just to reach everybody. In terms of budgeting, that was just a comment. We've done pre-approval of different things. In fact, we've pre-approved capital projects before we approve the budget. So, there's always a will, there's a way to deal with these situations. I just thought that if our director of communications were to say, hey, here's some different ways in which we can achieve our goal, but it will require a few dollars, I'm open to having that conversation. But, we invested in PlaySpeak. We have all kinds of different tools. All I'm asking is we use all of them. We just don't limit it to the planning department and the notification process that's outlined in the Planning Act. I'm saying utilize what the town has.
Thank you, Councillor.
Maybe the mayor can do something on social media.
Well, that's a given. I'll do that already.
Those are the tools we have.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and as Councillor Thompson is mentioning, maybe a little bit out of the box. This is not just a normal notification process, because many residents, get a flyer and they just, maybe there's a door knocking exercise. These are only 3 areas, maybe a door knocker on the door, you know, date of the planning meeting, link to the website, information, just so that they're well informed and can participate. So something just to think, and I don't mind having a little budget towards it as well.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Gallo.
I think if we're going to have a substantive public outreach program, in terms of the public understanding the changes, I think we need to be specific on what are the changes, because we're not there yet. This is why I'm kind of hesitant to move forward, because unless we're specific that we're saying we want public consultation and we want to tell the public that we're doing 9 meters, that we're doing 3,000 square feet, that we're doing 1-car garage, that we're doing X, Y, and Z, so that the response back is very specific. But the resolution that's 1 and 2 is very generic, and we still have holes in it. We don't know what that number is. If we're going to the gross floor area, we don't know what that number is. So what's the public going to input into? Their opinion? They already expressed their opinion. We already know that. I'm still, and I think staff is going to be a little confused unless we're specific in terms of what we're communicating to the public and asking them to respond to.
And Councillor Gallo, I'll agree with you. This is kind of a chicken, or what comes first, the chicken or the egg scenario, right? We can't tell the public what the specifics are until we get the specifics, and yet we can't get the specifics until staff develop them. And so we're kind of caught in this limbo area right now that we either need to move forward and have staff bring those specifics to us, and then we can get that information out and say these are the specifics that we're doing. So I agree with you. We're in a difficult situation when it comes to getting out the specifics to the public as far as what are the actual changes.
This is why, you know, what I got from the report is, you know, we need our professionals, whether in-house or outside help, to go into the neighborhood, analyze the stock in a detailed way, and come back to us and advise us on this is what's out there, this is what we believe the GFA should be, this is what we believe. We already have the 9 meters, but some of the other questions, whether it's in-house or outside, you know, that's I don't mind either way. And then that should be at the public meeting, and then we have a fruitful discussion because we've done all that consultation.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions to the amendment? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote using your tabulators. That carries. Back to the main motion as amended. Councillor Thompson, you still have the floor?
No, I don't know.
No, you're good. Anybody else? Comments or questions on the motion as amended? Actually, everyone's spoken twice except for Councillor Kim. So, Councillor Kim, unless you're good. All right. So, we'll wait for it to go up, and then I'll call for the vote. Councillors, it's on your iPad. So if you look at it, oh, now it's off. The amendment, Linda, the amendment. Public outreach. There we go, Council. So I'm going to call for the vote using your tabulators. And that carries unanimously. Okay. Confirming bylaw. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Gilliland. All those in favor, actually using your tabulators. That carries. And a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Kim, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. All those in favor, are we using your tabulators on this one? No? All hands up. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Brave the cold weather.